Good afternoon and welcome back. We will resume the Preparing the Soul for War Symposium momentarily. Please find your seats. Good afternoon. Our next two presenters, the first is Timothy Tito Torres. He is a national security strategist, counterterrorism expert, and fourth-generation Nevadan who served over 2 decades in the United States Army Special Operations, Intelligence, and Diplomacy. With 11 combat deployments, including time in the 75th Ranger Regiment, United Kingdom Special Forces, and other special mission units, Tito has operated on the front lines of America's most complex wars. He now serves as Vice President and CEO of the Moral Compass Federation, a coalition of over 25 veteran-led organizations working to address moral injury, national security, and crisis response. Through MCF, Tito leads efforts to engage Congress and senior policymakers, ensuring global war on terrorism era veterans remain part of the national conversation on war, recovery, and leadership. Tito speaks from experience about the cost of service, not just in lives, but in the moral weight carried long after. His mission now is to support those who've borne the burden of war and to build systems that bring our nation's warriors, policymakers, and healers into the same fight together. Our other presenter is Tony Main. He is a veteran advocate, leadership coach, and executive director of Gallant Few, a national nonprofit dedicated to improving the veteran experience through connection, coaching, and counseling. A 2024 inductee into the Ranger Hall of Fame, Tony brings over 2 decades of experience in the United States Army Special Operations, including 9 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment and 8 combat deployments. He was among the first special operators to respond to the attacks of September 11, 2001, participating in the regiment's initial parachute assaults into Afghanistan and Iraq. Today, Tony leads Gallant Few's efforts to build strong peer-to-peer networks, strengthen veteran transition systems, and partner with like-minded organizations nationwide. He is also the host of A More Elite podcast and author of the Warriors Walk blog, where he explores leadership, faith, and the challenges of post-military life. Please join us in welcoming Timothy Tito Torres and Tony Main.
For having us, and it's good to be home. I got in late last night. I spent some time here in my career. It's good to be around soldiers again. It's been a while since I've been able to have a few conversations like I have this morning, so thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to set the tone up front. This isn't going to be a lecture. We're looking to have a real conversation. I have Tony here, who's a Ranger, who mentored me over a decade ago and helped me start to bear the brunt of the war and everything that we had seen. You're going to hear a couple key themes out of us today. One, moral injury. It's real, it's here, it's going to be part of your generation, and I'll talk about where that's at. Leadership is soul work. We have an opportunity to start this at leadership from day one. The system is starting to catch up to us. We work in DC, we work with the VA. This is coming. It's something that's going to be a conversation, and I want to be able to update you on where that's coming and where it's going to hit your units in the coming years. Give you some tools, some advice from our lessons learned of where we can start, where you can find resources, not only for yourself as a leader, but for the men and women that you lead. My biggest takeaway is lead like the future version of you is watching. And that starts every day, show up for your men and women. And as we get that going, Tony, I'd love for you to intro of where you think this should go.
Well, first of all, let's start with the word war. There is no greater teacher than armed conflict. War progresses, war evolves. Our Vietnam generation, we learned a great deal as an American society of how to take care of our war fighters. We learned through error. I was a young man when Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm took place, And so seeing yellow ribbons for my generation in GWAT was a lesson learned. For those of you who are new to the post-GWAT large-scale combat life, you must learn the lessons where we failed as leaders at integrating moral injury into everything we do. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
So what is moral injury? I'm going to give you a little bit more of my view of how it affected me. I mean, we've seen some of the research, some of the data, we've seen some of the spiritual approach to this. One of the areas that I think is missing in some of the definitions and some of the leading scholars in the area have included is loss of trust in institutions. Loss of trust in institutions and leadership. And that's all of our responsibility, to continue the institutions that we all lead. And so for me, the fall of Kabul was a big moment in my life where everything came screaming back. I didn't feel like I had ever had a problem with any of the deployments, with any of the decisions that were made in combat, whether through my leadership or those leading me. I had been at peace with the war. Watching the way the Kabul ended brought back everything for me. Why did I give up my 20s fighting the war? Why did I lose my friends? Why did this all happen? And so that loss of trust in institutions, I had to face straight on. I had to dig into what had happened, what was going on, and where this came from. And that's where moral injury was introduced to me. It wasn't PTSD. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me and why I hit this low point until moral injury was introduced. And one of the differences to me between PTSD and moral injury is PTSD, I think, is something that you can start working on. It's something that you may want to get rid of some of those feelings. Moral injury will guide the rest of my life. I now work up at the policy level. My job, because my war has been fought, is to make sure that we never send people to war without a strategy, without an end state. And I want to be reminded every day of the way that Kabul ended, the way the war ended, for a lot of us in this room. And that's where I'll continue to fight, and that's how I've attacked it, through action. But to some of the conversations earlier, that was through love of the men that I served with, the men and women that I served with, love of my country, and love of where I think this country can go. What is moral injury to you, Tony?
Well, I'll start with my first experience with moral injury, and I didn't think about it at all really until preparing for this. And I was actually a fraternity boy at The Ohio State University, and this will go back to something that General Tully talked about earlier. This all relates, trust me. There was a phone call on our house phone, and a young man who I do not know, who was best friends of one of my fraternity brothers, died in a vehicle rollover about 2 years into his enlistment. My very good friend tried to commit suicide that night. And I did not remember that until thinking about this topic with y'all, and then General Tully's remarks of how we deal with the approach truly affects everyone. Now, I would go back to Dave Grossman's last talk in terms of when we look at moral injury and post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress is a thing, it's not a disorder. Moral injury, the term injury, means something negative. This world, if you don't have moral injury, you keep a very bad scorecard. You just maybe deal with it and have the tools that others don't.
Well, to your point, something that we say at MCF is how do we move moral injury to moral recovery, right? And part of the reason that we're here, we have a big initiative this year. We want to move left of Bang. There's a lot of working on veterans, working on the GWAT generation, but those conversations need to start here. And I commend everybody that put this together, because you're seeing this happen across the board. And we look at sports, right? A lot of us, everybody here has read Duke coach leadership books. And this soul preparation, this mental preparation, is starting to happen across different fields and different areas where we look for leadership lessons learned. Let's talk about where moral injury is right now, and one of the areas that I think I can touch on that not many other are working on. So we're working in DC to make moral injury part of the conversation and how we move forward. It is not in the DSM-6. It is not diagnosable. It is not classified such as PTSD. But I can tell you it's part of the conversation, it's part of the national conversation. So we've met with the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Mast and Chairman McCall, the former chairman. We've met with the House Veteran Affairs Committee. We've met with the Senate Arms Committee. We've also met with the VA. And I can tell you this is something that's coming. There's legislation being introduced, and there is language in the NDAA this year that's being fought for, that moral injury is going to become more of the conversation. What's the so what to you as leaders is this is something that's coming down the pipe. It is something that there's going to be legislation, there's going to be funding behind how do we prepare the soul for war. And I think preparation in this generation is really how we focus on that. Right now, I'm fighting for the GWAT generation to be able to turn the page and rewrite how it ended in 2021. For 20 years, people were sent to war and did their job. The way it ended didn't do it justice to this generation. Your generation, you get to focus on the prevention for the next generation. That is our bear to fight, that is our job to go, but it's how we institute this for the next generation. And let me tell you how much this is happening at the leadership level. I was lucky enough to brief the National Security Council counterterrorism entire cell about a week ago. I had 4 hours with them, and I can tell you there was about 45 minutes conversation about moral injury with Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, former Green Beret. This is something that's very near and dear to his heart. So you have the highest level of our National Security Advisors putting this in the ear of the President and our Commander-in-Chief. This is something that's being discussed at a national level, and I do think you're going to see it trickle down in your careers to be something that's much more prevalent. You come from a different angle on this.
Okay, so yeah, big brain DC guy, lobbyist. Not lobbyist.
Well, I was a Ranger Regiment private. Let's be clear here.
As was I. All right, and so Georgetown degree, I can't spell it. We'll just say that I'm going to talk more to the user level. All right, so you'll get an overview of big brain, where we're going, policy, and then if we still have the lieutenants in here, the practical, tactical, right? Like I care more, and I don't care more, but I'll talk more to the TTPs. So as we look and we listen to our speakers, this is Leadership 101, right? This is a segment of Leadership 101. Right, this for you, hopefully young leaders, is an awareness to a topic that maybe that you haven't thought about, something that maybe you need to develop a little bit more in, especially in your spiritual and purpose side, to better relate to those that you serve. So although the title says At War, I was really intrigued with this seminar because this goes, once again, think to my original comments about my first impact with moral injury. There's going to be moral injuries with a divorce or a breakup within your formation. There's going to be a moral injury when somebody has a training accident and then becomes a med board, right? Go through the physical evaluation board and then loses their career. The most critical time when we look at post-service results is the transition window and how you lead and learn about that critical time for all your people who may be of no use to you because they're off of your roster, but still part of our Army. That all matters. If you, just like anything else, if you can do it in training, you can do it in combat. There is no doubt. You know, war's the Super Bowl. I think we performed well in war in our unit. We were trained for the Super Bowl. Right? So these are become all opportunities to utilize in your leadership positions.
Well, like you said, Leadership 101, one of the reasons I felt that I had gotten through the war so well with my own mental health, and it wasn't until the Kabul evacuation, was because I had fantastic leadership. I felt like I was well prepared for the task. I felt like we trained hard, and we worked our butts off to be ready to go, and we had that confidence. And I'll tell you, 20 years later, I'm sitting in this seat. I still have men and women that worked for me or that I worked for that are still very close friends. We're all in a signal group, but that's part of the healing that people took the time to sit with me and develop me as a human being, and it made me a better ranger, it made me a better soldier, and it made me more lethal on the battlefield. There is one thing I want to hit on what moral injury is, because 15 years ago, you would have lost me in this room. I wouldn't be paying attention. I'd be sitting in the back, because I'm not a religious person. But And you'll hear a lot come to this from a religious angle, and I think that's part of it. But spirituality is a much better word, right? Something that's bigger than yourself. Whether you dig into philosophy, stoicism, post-stoicism, whatever that is, but it has to be something bigger than yourself. But the clarity of your values is more important than what title you put on that being part of something that's bigger than yourself. The first defense against moral injury isn't therapy, it's clarity. Clarity in your values, in your intent, and in your chain of command in this case. I think that's really important. So for those that don't go down that path currently, this is a topic that is still very important and can be approached from multiple angles of what that means to you and what it means to the men and women that you lead. Let's talk about how both of our organizations are attacking this from our different point of views. I'll let Gallant Few start from the tactical side of it.
Well, we said in our mission statement that we provide connection, coaching, and counseling. So I want to table that for a second because it goes along with the title. And Travis, great job. I don't know if you came up with it. I don't know who approved it. But the soul for war, not preparing the leader for war, but the soul for war. So with Gallant Few, we believe that everybody's an individual. Fair enough. Now we're talking about preparing the soul for war. And I have some very smart people coming up after us who can provide a much better definition. But first, do you believe that you have a soul? And if you do believe that you have a soul, is it a unique soul? And then if you do have a unique soul, did someone create that soul not being you? Because you didn't create your own life. Right? I'm not trying to make you see my religious point of view. I'm trying to make something that's complicated a little bit more 1 + 1 math. So what Gallant Few does, knowing that, is we treat everybody as an individual. This will be one of the few times in the year we'll do a group type exercise because we will 100%. After this, I'll leave and go 2 counseling sessions later today. But that's how we're attacking it. And Gallant Few isn't enough. We're not big enough. But I'll tell you what I did learn in Ranger Regiment that I believe along this line of how we're doing it, because I learned it through good leadership. That word humility that was shown on the first slide as a key characteristic needed for an empathetic leader. Are you your best coach? How overconfident would you have to be to say, well, when I go in Barnes & Noble and I pick up a book, it's the right thing for me and it's working? Would you want a subordinate to do that? For future company commanders going through CCC, you want a lieutenant to say, oh, that's all right, I got it. Right? The humility piece with this counseling, so what regiment did, right, it's all part of human performance, still getting to the same end. That's why moral injury has this connotation. The wording, verbiage matters. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to ensure that every veteran has access to performance counseling, clinical counseling, but more than that, has the desire to want to do it, because it is the true hallmark of having humility, seeking assistance to perform better.
Yeah, and we take a similar approach, but we have a different piece of the pie. There are 52,000 VSOs. And something Travis and I had talked about is, as young leaders, you guys are going to have a lot to wade through of who are the good organizations to work with, who's doing the best work out there. And that it's tough. There's 52,000 of them out there. I think this generation is very entrepreneurial. They're like, screw it, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to go fix the problem myself, right? And that's a good thing. We should embrace that. So MCF was born out of the Kabul evacuation with how we felt and how a lot of people felt drawn to that. And that wasn't just GWAT generation. A lot of Americans felt that feeling, felt how this was wrong, and felt they needed to do something about that. So we didn't want to create just another VSO. We are a convener. That's our job. We bring together VSOs. We have 25 organizations that we work with, and we're partnered with another 15. We're partnered with universities. We do work with the VA, trying to get more and more conversation happening there. We carry a lot of the water to a lot of these grassroots organizations that 100% would love to push funds into pushing legislation, pushing language in the NDAA to fix the root of the problem and be able to get the large amount of funding or the large amount of research or XYZ to fix the root. We are carrying a lot of that water because we're seeing the signaling across the nation of what's happening right now, and we're trying to empower all these grassroots organizations. That's where we work, but we build our entire moral injury network, is what we call it, of the organizations that we bring in around kind of the NICO whole body approach. And this goes back to what Tony was saying. If you're not physically feeling good, if you're not mentally taken care of, if you're not high performance training, have mentorship, mentoring others, if you don't have that whole kind of spiritual whole body approach, moral injury is going to result out of that. What is the ultimate moral injury? Is you let down your men and women that you're leading. Or where I'm at right now, working with the counterterrorism group up at the NSC, number one priority to prevent future moral injury is we have good policy to prevent attack on the homeland. I mean, talk about something that's going to keep us up at night. That's why we're all here, to ultimately protect everything that we love, to go back to Carl Grossman's conversation. So MCF is attacking this from the top down using grassroots and ground truth, while you guys are working on the individual. And we need everybody involved across silos. That's academia. We need our veterans heavily involved. And somewhere where I'm glad to see this is the conversation happening with active duty. We need to have those conversations left of bang of what is going on in the preparation for the next war. And I'll tell you, we have organizations in Ukraine. I have seen a lot of combat, and I think Sergeant Major of the Army said this. I've seen a lot of combat. I have not seen a war like that. I knew what I was going to when I joined the Army. I was going to deploy every 6 months to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. You're preparing for the next large-scale combat, large-scale, whatever it looks like. That's what you're preparing for, and that work starts now of how we can be successful on the battlefield, bring violence where it needs to be brought, and come home with the right attitude and be able to contribute to society like all the great generations had. What are some leadership tools in kind of the crux of this, as we have a couple more minutes of leading? And I'll start with one story. I had fantastic leadership, like I had mentioned, but I didn't realize at that age, and I don't think they realized, that they were preparing my soul for war. And I'll give you one example. After my first firefight, Dave McDowell, who was a platoon sergeant up at 275, who was killed in 2008. He pulled me aside, and we were talking. I was his RTO. Apparently, I was too dumb to be a line guy. I was a line guy most of my career. I hated being pulled in to be an RTO. I fought it. But Dave pulled me in, and he said, Tito, do not kill with anger. He said, you are professional. Your job is to come here, win the fight, bring all the boys home, and prepare for the next fight. But don't start killing with anger. Understand that half these people probably don't even want to fight you, but it's the situation we're in, and go do it with violence and do it correctly. I didn't realize until years later how important that advice was, and why I think all the trigger pulls, I didn't have a problem with any of them because I felt that I was doing the right thing in the context of it, but ultimately my job was to bring the boys home. That's a big one for me. The leadership of that is you're not just shaping the missions, you're shaping memories that men are going to carry for the rest of their lives. And what's old is new. We were talking about gates of fire at lunch, what should be mandatory reading, which I'm pretty sure it is at some point in your guys' career. But we talk about sitting around the fire, talking about what happened, being vulnerable, leadership being vulnerable. Go sit down with your men and women and be like, yeah, that kind of sucked. How are you feeling about that? What's old is new. Now we're just attacking it in a new way and approaching this with a new title called moral injury. But warriors and warrior culture have been working through this since the dawn of time.
For sure. I will tell you, I really do want to share a lessons learned that's been on my heart for a long time, and it goes back to the how do you communicate with your soldiers about these topics, and it is how you look at war. The enemy gets a vote, and the phrase that I started to hear as we started getting to the 15-month deployments, a year off, 15 months on, really good times. which is what you might expect in large-scale operations if they don't end quick or the peace doesn't come, you move into stability, is we got to bring everybody home. You are in the wrong organization if you want to fight war and have your number one metric be that everybody comes home. Think of that mindset. Saul Gunner, 3rd Platoon, 2nd Squad, Bravo team, and his buddy gets blown up in an IED. Did he fail? We fight away games. We're the away team. Is everybody tracking that due to, U.S. laws and whatnot of using the military on their own people, right? We fight as an away team. Anybody like Civil War history? I'm a big Civil War buff. Can last really long when you fight on your own terrain. Respect your enemy and be very careful about how you couch what success is. Your leaders determine success above you. You determine success below you, all nested, of course. Don't forget that. A lot of the moral injury came from leaders at the final ceremony saying, we're going to bring everybody back. No, you're not. If you do, congratulations. But don't think that that can necessarily be repeated. And I'll close my remarks with, and I do this in my 8th grade servant leadership class. Go back to General Moore, right, in the We Were Soldiers movie. I cannot promise I will bring everybody back. That's not just for Hollywood. You may not say it like that, but I would consider you inculcate that into your leadership approach.
Yeah, so as we close out, one more nugget as you reach, Travis asked if I could bring some resources. Start local. That would be my big piece of advice. When you reach your outstations out there, start local, find the local nonprofits. If they say they only serve veterans, call them, because I guarantee they want to serve more active duty. It just happens to be who they have access to. Have 3 or 4 in your back pocket. Go have the dinner, go have the lunch, go have the coffee with the leaders of those organizations. Have them before you need them. That is probably one of the most tactical advice I'd give you. Do that as soon as you get to your outstations. And I'll close here. Lead the future version of you like the future version of you is watching, because they are. The 40-year-old version of you is going to live through what you do in the next 5, 10, and 20 years. Make decisions now that men and women can be proud of, because that's the person you're leading forward. We can't promise you won't carry scars. We've felt it. But if you stay human, stay humble, and stay present, you can come home with your soul intact. And more importantly, the men and women that you lead can come home with their soul intact. Every leader leaves a trail behind them. Make yours one others can walk in without shame. And one day, and it comes faster than you realize, because this is me coming home, being able to talk and help shape the next generation, you're going to be sitting in this chair, passing the lessons on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres and Mr. Main. For the next presentations, we will divide between students and cadre soldiers in a student status at MCoE will remain here in Marshall Auditorium for a presentation by Lieutenant Colonel retired Jeff Teagues. Meanwhile, those who are cadre or permanent party will relocate to Derby Auditorium for a presentation by Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Jared Vineyard. Derby Auditorium is located down the main hallway to the right. Rangers and visitors are welcome to choose to attend either presentation. Both will be recorded and available for viewing on the MCoE YouTube page. Following those presentations, we will consolidate in Marshall Auditorium at 1500 for the next session. Thank you. counterinsurgency expert with over 25 years of service in U.S. Army Special Operations. He has commanded combat operations in Panama, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Teagues has written about his combat and military experiences in the novel, Where Have All the Heroes Gone? A Pilgrimage Through the Bible, the Battlefield, and Back Home Again, published in 2023. He is currently the president of Skull Games, which provides analytical and operational support to law enforcement agencies engaged in counter-sex trafficking operations. At Skull Games Incorporated, they utilize open-source intelligence to identify victims of sexual exploitation, the predators abusing them, and other persons of interest by creating leads that enable law enforcement to interdict the cycle of abuse and empower survivors of trauma to live a life of hope, healing, and freedom. Please join us in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Teagues.
Check, check, check. There we go. All right. So a few years ago, many years ago now, I woke up in the morning, did my PT, had a cup of coffee, and I walked down into the Tactical Operations Center in Iraq. We're in Kayara West, and I'm in charge of an aerial assault element hunting in the Western Desert. The plan was to push Al-Qaeda and ISIS out of the main urban area of Mosul, where we would police them up. So I'm sitting here sipping my coffee, and I've got my hunting areas, and I've got the numbers and people that we were hunting that day. And my intel guy says, hey, Abu Nur just came up. And I paused. I said, the Abu Nur? The military emir of Mosul, who we'd been looking for a couple of years? And he said, yeah, it's what's connected to the Abu Nur. So again, show of hands, how many have been in combat? Okay, so some of you know the details. I'm not going to get into all of the details on how we find guys and how we track guys, but we know who we're looking for, right? And this guy we've been looking for a couple of years. So I wasn't sure. Did he make a mistake? Did he hand off this selector that we had been tracking? So there are ways that we figure this out and we find out. And one of those things is, when was the last time we identified him? That we heard him speaking, and we were either able to identify his voice, or he said something where he identified himself, or someone else identified him. So that's called VID, PID, right? So that's the first question I have for my intel. When was the last time we VID'd or PID'd this guy? It had been over a year. Where are we seeing him? Where's he located at? Where's he popping up at? So I'm down here in a little place called Q West, right? Mosul is up here. This is Highway 1. It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive from where I'm at in Q West to Mosul. Where does Abu Nur pop up at? He pops up over here in the middle of the desert. Is it him? I don't know. Give me a motivated, gutsy lieutenant, captain. I don't really care. Someone who's going to not be a dick. You're going to play ball. Come on up here. You're leaning forward. You did the old stripes. Yeah, come on up. All right. So what do? Okay, this is a guy we've been looking for 2 years. I have all sorts of assets. What do?
Send some other recon element to verify it.
Perfect. Okay, and again, I'm working for a national mission force, so I got every recon element that you can think of. I got satellites at my disposal. I got ISR assets in a stack. So I send them out here to start to hunt. Okay? We can't find him. The only thing that I can understand is he moved from here to here to here to here. What do I conclude?
It's probably going to Mosul.
That's a little too far, Lieutenant. Right now, he's moving north. Okay? Let's go with that. He's moving north. But yes, you're beginning to assume that he's moving towards Mosul. All right? What are other things that are at my disposal? Too slow. Rate of travel. Rate of travel. This is out here in the middle of the desert. So now my collection assets are telling me how long is it taking to get him to get to here, to get to here. And that speed corresponded with movement on a hardball road, not out in the middle of the desert. So now, Lieutenant Hoffman, where do you think he is?
He's on some hardball road out in the middle of the desert.
Yep. Good. You didn't overstep. I thought you were going to say he's on Highway 1, okay? But that's an assumption, right? Now, this idea of facts and assumptions, and you guys are learning this stuff. Your job with all of these assets is to take what are assumptions and try to make them facts. So I'm making assumption after assumption. I think potentially that's Abu Nur. I think potentially he's on this road. Bunch of intersections on the way there. His selector goes dead. I have no other collection on him other than imagery. So what do I ask my intel folks?
To describe whatever he was traveling in.
Boom, this guy's good. This guy's good. This gives me hope. Yes. What was the last vehicle Abu Nur owned? And it was a gray sedan. It was a gray sedan, and it had a dent in the left side rear panel. So now I've repositioned my assets, right? So this is a Highway 1 between Q West and Mosul. Where am I putting my assets? Tell me. I'm going to give you a choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, choice 4. Where do I position my assets?
I would say choice 4, given that he was already moved to north.
Okay, all right. Not bad. All right. Why else choice 4?
It's at the intersection.
God, this guy's good. You, dude, I'm glad you leaned forward. You're making this so easy. This is at an intersection, and those of you that have been in Iraq, the cars pile up. So if I am now looking at an imminent trigger, I'm trying to identify, and I'm looking for a silver sedan with a dented rear left quarter panel, I've got to have time to see that and take pictures. So we leave it here. Now we also did that analysis timing. Okay, he's probably past this one. He's probably past this one. I keep leapfrogging the ISR, okay? Now he's up here. Guess what we find? A silver sedan with a dented left rear quarter panel. Is it Abu Nur?
You still don't know.
I still don't know. Do I launch the force? Bro, we've been in the air already. Come on. So this is a 40-minute to an hour-long drive. I launched the helo force, and we're flying circles over here trying to figure out, is that Abu Nur or not? Okay? Now, Abu Nur is getting closer to Mosul. About, I think it was maybe a mile or two, maybe further than that, outside of Mosul. He picks up 2 women, right? The full ninja burqas, 2 women hitchhiking. You guys that have been you know how that is, right? Like the people will stop and pick up the women, right? And give them rides. They don't put their thumb out. They just walk and they get picked up. So before you get into Mosul, there's a traffic circle right here in the beginning, and there's a bunch of military checkpoints right there. He picks up the women somewhere out here. Is it Abu Nur?
Still don't know, but probably not to pick up the women.
Okay, that's where you're wrong. First time you screwed up. Okay, I'm a seasoned old wise Delta Force guy, right? I'm saying it's him because he takes 2 women, sticks them in the car to get through that checkpoint, right? He also knows he's getting closer and closer to American troops who have occupied Mosul, and nobody wants to get in a gunfight with women. I don't mind it because I'm in the Delta Force. I'd done it before. The first time I told my guys, are you comfortable shooting around the kids? And they came back with, we are. The first time I gave the order, shoot around the kids, was a tough one. The second time, the third time, I don't think it was many more than that. It got easier and easier because they built confidence in their capacity, okay? And we had trained for it. So now that he picked up these 2 women, I say, gentlemen, you know the deal. Don't shoot the women. He's getting closer and closer to Mosul. We're putting on the gas. We've got timing device, we've got timing everything 3 minutes out, 2 minutes out. At a certain time, I'm looking at the ISR in the helicopter. I've got one right here. You're good. I'm going to stand up here now. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to call on you again probably because you're so good. In this helicopter, it's a UH-60. I've got an ISR screen in front of me, and I've got an ISR screen to the side. And some point in this assault, I stop looking at ISR, and I have to hang out the helicopter and see what's going on, because TV ain't good enough. I have to identify that vehicle. I have to identify what it is we're going to do, and we're getting closer and closer to Mosul. Now, I had just gotten a spanking a couple days earlier because my boss said, you guys are doing these aerial assaults too close to urban areas. you're putting the helicopters at risk. Stop doing aerial assaults so close to these urban areas. Roger, sir. And I meant it. I meant it. But I also had been in discussion with him. We were hunting Highway 1. And along Highway 1, there's urban areas all over the place. So these timings, these standards that we had established, you need to be 1,000 meters from a built-up area, there really is no such thing on Highway 1. If you want me to hunt, and I said to my boss, if you want me to hunt Highway 1, we're going to have to assume a little bit more risk. He said, I understand what you're saying. Stop doing the hits near built-up areas. Roger that. We're getting closer and closer and closer to Mosul. I hear 3 minutes. I lean out the door, and Mosul's like right there. The timing was off. Kenny, who I had been working with that entire rotation, was an incredible flyer. Never made mistakes. I don't know what had happened that day. He was just off. I hang out the helicopter, and we're about a minute out from Mosul, not 3 minutes. Kenny starts saying, we're too close, we need to abort. And he starts to shift the lead helicopter, and he's talking to me on the internal comms. And I said, negative, get back on track, get back on the attack track. So he kind of comes back in line, and if you see this thing on video, I have it all on video. I'll post it on YouTube later, just kidding. You can see this, you can see the lead helicopter kind of juke, and a couple of them follow, and then he comes back online. He doesn't call abort, I call abort. And I'm doing the math in my mind, and the last thing I needed to do was find a place for those helos to land. So we're screaming in towards Mosul. I see the car right here. I jump over to the other side. I look ahead, and I can see a football field, a soccer field. I do my Akoka, right? You guys all know Akoka? What's Akoka? Come on. Right there, another redhead. I'd go for 2 redheads. What's Akoka?
You're not thinking like Okoka?
Dude, is it Oakok now? Oakok? Is that what it is? Yeah. Back in my day, that was politically incorrect to say Oakok. We used to say Akoka. Okay? You say Oakok, I say Akoka. All right? So what's Oakok? What? Nice teamwork, gentlemen. Nice teamwork. All right. If you're not an Oakok or Akoka person, study it because it's good at the macro level and it's good at the micro level. And that is constantly running in my mind. Akoka is constantly running in my mind. It's my PTS. It's what some people would consider PTS. It's not. It's my superpower. It's something that's so ingrained to me of years in combat. I'm constantly in the back of my mind, no matter where I am, running through Akoka. I'm never going to go to Oakok. So wherever that goes through. So I'm doing Akoka in my mind, and I just need a place for him to land that's safe. And I see it. I reach back out. Silver car. Execute. That was my command to the team leader, where I now give control to him. The other thing I had seen was that was a box canyon he was going into. There was, right next to the Mosul traffic circle, here's the Mosul traffic circle, road, checkpoint. Make the checkpoint here. Between that checkpoint and here, there was a serpentine. So I see he's got to go through a serpentine. He's got to go through a checkpoint. HESCO barriers on one side, HESCO barriers on the other. I'm not the biggest Louis L'Amour fan, but I've read a couple of them, right? Classic box canyon. He has nowhere to go. Execute. I hand it off to my team leader, Jamie. I'll tell you the rest later. What did I know? What did we know? Not much. But what was my job? What was my duty? I'm going to read to you, there's some cleaned up mission statements, okay? And here's the thing about a mission statement. Commander's intent. The way that I look at them. I look at them kind of like a contract, right? This is our contract, boss. And you need to have these discussions with your boss. And when you get to the higher levels of responsibility, you need to have these discussions with your subordinates. Because mission and intent Is there a letter of the law with mission and intent? No, it's called intent, right? So let me read a couple things here. This is, again, these are kind of some, bastardized versions of these missions. Task Force higher headquarters, right? Two levels up? 2 levels up. Task Force higher headquarters conducts offensive operations to degrade enemy networks, enabling others to stabilize and transform the region. Do I have anything to do with that? No. And this ties in with what you guys were talking about, with moral injury. You have to protect yourself from moral injury, but understand what you can control. Could I control the way we withdrew from Afghanistan? Newsflash, we did the same thing in Iraq. We did the same exact thing in Iraq. We left them all hanging. What we didn't have was the dramatic exfil that we saw on HKIA. We did the same thing. Almost every man that I fought with for years in Iraq was murdered. But that is higher headquarters' job, not mine. Now, headquarters. Headquarters conducts partnered, joint combined interagency operations against high payoff enemy leaders throughout the region to disrupt insurgent forces that limit stability operations. Is that my job? It's starting to get close, right? You're starting to see how it applies to me. Now here's my mission. The troop, on order, conducts precision helicopter assault operations to kill, capture suspected terrorist personnel in order to gain intelligence and disrupt the network. Is that clear? What is my job? Kill bad guys. Kill or capture bad guys. And believe me, KC, kill, capture. CK, capture, kill. That might seem like not a big deal to you guys, but it was everything. That was all I needed my boss to either agree with. Were we going in to kill this guy? Kill, capture? So we're going in to kill him. If he puts his hands up, he's going to be captured. Or are we going in to capture him and he decides to fight and we're going to kill him? So that KC nuance was huge. A couple other things that went in there. The purpose. Capture, kill high-value targets who expose themselves during daylight hours. The end state. High-value targets captured and killed in assault force, reset, and prepared for follow-on missions. Okay. Keep that mission in mind. Because oftentimes, those of you that have been overseas, your mission contradicts 2 levels up in many ways. Not in a huge way, but you have to recognize and understand who you are. And my identity was never a Ranger. My identity was never Special Forces. My identity was never in Delta Force. Those were my duty positions, and I took them seriously. My identity was as a protector. I was there to protect American citizens, my teammates, and it was either Iraq or Afghanistan. Whoever it was that I was fighting for, I was there to protect them. And when we go back to that very first briefing this morning, which I loved, he talked about all of these different hierarchies, right? Now, was it in my mission statement or higher headquarters to protect civilians? No, that's an implied task, right? The point of this story is most of what you're going to do in these complex environments, it's not going to be black and white. And you've got to prepare yourself with that relationship with that commander well before you're being permitted to make these decisions. And I will tie that towards the end of this discussion, same with this idea of your spiritual health and your soul. You have got to figure out a bunch of this stuff ahead of time. Like I talked about, shooting around the kids. How many would make that call? Yeah. Mike would. Mike's a seasoned vet, right? Because you get to know your men. I would never make that call if I didn't know they could do it. I would never make that call if we hadn't trained them and I didn't know them and we had this shared experience. When you talk about the elements, these are still, did you guys change this too? Speed, surprise, violence, are these still the elements of CQB? Speed, surprise, violence of action, right? We talk about that. Well, what's implied in there? How is it that you move fast? You have to be trained. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know where you're going. How do you surprise somebody? How can I surprise you? Yep, but even in a more general sense. I have to know you. I have to know your nuances. I have to know where you're going. I have to know your pattern of life, all of these things. And you guys, like Colonel Grossman was talking about, I discourage you to study the strategic stuff. Read the tea leaves, recognize where the threats are. Oh, by the way, they're everywhere, sorry. Where is the next fight going to break out? Central America? I don't know. Africa? I don't know. So who is it you're going to study? Study warfare in general. Stop watching the news and worrying about what Trump is doing or what Biden is doing or any of that type of stuff. That is so, like, how many higher headquarters positions is that? You need to master this. If you work for me, you need to master that. Take a look at that. You guys all recognize that? If you don't know every single one of those tactical tasks like the back of your hand, then turn off CNN, turn off Fox News, and open up that FM and start reading. Open up these stories of these histories of all these men and women that are talking about their experiences. I read everything from the BC era up until my fight. There's an Iraqi guerrilla warfare manual. All it is the French insurgency manual translated into Arabic and Saddam signed it. When I started to read the tea leaves that we were going to Iraq, what do you think I read? That book. How many here have read the Iraqi counterinsurgency FM? Did you ever hear about it, Mike? Of all the time you spent in Iraq? No, it should have been mandatory reading. How about in Afghanistan, The Bear Went Over the Mountain, The Other Side of the Mountain by Lester Grau? If you didn't read those books and you went to Afghanistan, shame on you. It's not very easy to dig fighting positions in the mountains. If you guys ever go back to Afghanistan, they're using the same fighting positions they used with Alexander the Great and Napoleon and the Russians. It's already templated. I sat at home looking at Lester Grau's maps and writing TRPs for missions that I was going to do in a couple of months because I know exactly where they're going to be. So in order for me to surprise somebody, I have to know enough about you to get the jump on you. And then violence of action needs to be practiced. These can't just be things that we talk about. Okay? So once again, looking at all of these tactical tasks, this is the field manual that you guys need to dig into, and you need to practice it. So going back to this first slide, this is my FM, PM 144.1. Any clever body? I'll jump on the chaplains here. We'll put the chaplains on the spot. Any chaplain know what I'm talking about there? PM 144.1.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. If you don't already have a favorite Bible passage, you can steal that one. There is a time and place for violence. There is a time and place for justice, not vengeance, not anger. I found myself in Iraq and Afghanistan gravitating towards the Old Covenant. I almost exclusively read the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, because I could relate to what they were going through and what was asked of them. And then when I would come home, I would pivot to the New Covenant and find my absolution and return to elements of love. But love never went away. My love was justice. Let's go back to that hit now, okay? So, my OACOC was bad. I say execute, execute, execute. I hand that control off to the team leader. The minigun shoots rounds in front of that gray vehicle. That's us telling him, hey, bro, time to stop. If I was you, I would stop. Was that minigun good for anything else? No. Why? There's women in the back seat of the car. So all that minigun, all the hype of that minigun did one thing, and that was send a message. In that door, there's three trained snipers. One of them's trained to shoot the engine block, one of them trained to shoot the tires, and the other one's trained to shoot the driver. And it's kind of that escalation as we're going through. Because I don't know who this guy is, right? I have no idea who he is. He's just driving a silver car with a rear dented left quarter panel. But my gut told me it was him. And like I said, once I saw him pick up those women, I was beyond convinced that's him. And because I was convinced that was him, I was a dog on a bone. And I was not going to let him go. Because this guy was responsible for hundreds and hundreds of Iraqi deaths, and dozens of American deaths. So in my math, do you think I'm hearing my boss? Teagues, don't do aerial assaults near urban areas. Do you think I'm hearing that in my mind? Yes, I am, to a degree. To a degree. I definitely, push it aside. Because what was in my mind as my identity as a protector is, if this is him and I don't get him right now, how many hundreds of people are going to die? How many more American soldiers is this guy going to kill? How many Iraqi civilians and children is this guy going to kill? I am in the MFDF, if you guys know what that means, MF Delta Force. This is what we do. We do things no one else can. He gets to those serpentines. I should have known better. The serpentine was nothing. This is him. So first of all, I back up. We shoot the minigun burst. He slows down, and he stops. Where's my man? Is it him? Did that make me think it was him more or less? Less, right. We shoot the minigun, and he stops. Oh, crap. Maybe it ain't him. Then he guns it. He guns it. And he's driving as fast as he can, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, because there wasn't that big of a space, and he gets to the serpentine roadblocks of the Iraqi checkpoint. And it kind of looked like this. Pretend I'm a car, okay? A silver sedan with a dented butt, okay? This is him going through the serpentine. Again, because they're lazy, right? They set this checkpoint up so traffic could kind of flow. This guy this was his correction driving. He never slowed down. So I'm thinking, this is him, get him. And in the same part of my mind, I'm like, I'm screwed. We are in the Mosul traffic circle. We are now inside Mosul. And there's thousands of people all over the place. We get a mobility kill on the vehicle. It stops right in the traffic circle. The driver of the vehicle opens the door. He steps out, looks at the helicopter, and drops. One of our guys in the helicopter dropped him. He didn't get a step out of the car. Is it Abu Nur? I hope so, someone said. That's me. I'm like, I hope that's him, because we just killed this guy. Up until then, one of my courses of action, my course of action 1, was capture him, figure out who he is. I don't know who he is. My course of action 2 is if he demonstrates a threat, kill him. Well, I had to go to course of action 2. It was super tricky landing those helicopters. And you guys, when you guys get back to your home, look at Mosul Highway 1, look at the traffic circle, right there at the south end of Mosul. You can see it. It happened right there. There's wires everywhere. Probably the most dangerous thing we did was the pilots landed. Like they were like, trying to get through all of these wires. I just stood there and watched it. I was like, that is amazing. How do you guys do that? And when my troop sergeant major landed, we walked and we shook hands. And he said to me, it was fun while it lasted. I said, Roger that. It was fun while it lasted. I'm making a series of decisions of the best information that I have, but knowing what my duty is. There wasn't another group of people on the planet, maybe a couple of other troops, but there's no other unit on the planet that could have pulled off what we just pulled off. So we go in, we pull the women out of the car, we look for him, we find the selector that we were looking for. Was it him? You hope it was him. But I was prepared to lose my career on those set of decisions. I don't know for a fact that I would have been fired, but there certainly would have been grounds for me to be fired, but I would accept that because my job is a protector. You heard my bio. I'm still protecting people. I work in the counter-sex trafficking space. There are times when you have to understand who you are and what you do and what your duty is and not try to please your boss. I'm not saying disobey orders or any of that. Again, with the general that was here and spoke, like there's these relationships, but there's sometimes a tension between what you're asked to do and what you're expected to do and what higher headquarters wants you to do. We flew about 20 meters over the HESCO barriers to a giant fob. That's another thing, right? This guy had the guts to drive right past an American Ford operator. I think it was it Merez? What was that big fob where the bomb went off in the chow hall? Merez? I think it was Fob Merez right there. Thousands of soldiers right there. We flew, we landed, my boss came out like this. Pretty close to an urban area. I said, yeah, boss. Yeah, I apologize for that. Our timings were off. But it's Abu Nur. He's like, got it. Nice job. Let me call the big boss. He calls the unit commander. You're fired, Teagues. Okay, fine. A couple hours later, the division commander and whoever the two-star general was, run in Mosul, wanted to meet me and thank me for killing his HVI #1 that they had been hunting for 2 years. Teagues, you're not fired anymore. I have too many of these stories. But again, I hope you're hearing what I'm saying, okay? This is your profession. It's not necessarily your career. Your profession is a profession of arms. Use them. Use your arms. Have that discussion. A two-star general told me one time, we were getting ready, we were looking for this guy for hours and hours, this is Afghanistan now, looking for this guy for hours and hours and hours and hours. We ran through the day shift into the night shift, and he walked out of the village all by himself and sat down on a rock, contemplating life. Let's go get him. Two-star officer tells me, hey, Jeff, you know, sometimes you got to just know when to let him go. When to fight another day. I'm sorry. Who are you talking to? What did you assess and select and choose me for? To let my enemy go? And we went and got him. Easy day. The things that you're going to deal with and what I'm trying to tell you with these stories is it's so gray. It's so gray. And so much of that grayness leads to that ambiguity and that moral ambiguity. And you begin to question yourself. I honestly can't remember any time that I saw in over a decade of combat where somebody violated a black and white. I can't think of one. But in that gray space, it's really up for interpretation. And you've got to carry that on your shoulders. So, the other thing that I want to talk about, I like coming in, I like having kind of an open mind with these discussions because it was, Grossman again spoke about the autonomic nervous system. And he said the 2 F's, right? What were they? Fight, flight. What's the other one?
Feed and breathe.
Yeah, but freeze. He missed freeze. So faint. I don't know faint. Okay, I like faint. What I just learned was fawn. So fawn and faint are probably similar. I like that. I'm going to go with fawn. Faint, you can use faint too. But fight, flight, freeze. You better not freeze. Everyone in here is either an officer or an NCO. I don't think there are any privates in here, right? If you're a private and you freeze, you've got some splaining to do. But that team leader, that squad leader, they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they did not prepare you appropriately. You do not have the luxury to freeze. If you don't know, and again, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are not going to freeze in combat. If you don't know that already, then you need to consider a different line of work. Because this is voluntary. And if you're still struggling, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can kill a guy, I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with it, find another job. That's one course of action. Another course of action is figure it out. And you need to test yourself. And how are you going to test yourself? You need to get into as close as you can to understanding and realizing combat. The first time I went to combat was in 1989 with the 1st Ranger Battalion. I was a corporal, I ran a team. And the first man I shot, what was in my head was, wow, this is just like training. Just like training. Instead of having a stationary silhouette shooting at, the guy was doing one of these, you know what I mean? Like it was a little bit more complicated. But in my mind, I was shocked. This was just like training. Almost exactly like training. The sights and the sounds and the smells, it was exactly like training. I was 20 years old, and I retired when I was 45 or something like that. For 25 years, I trained my guys with that in mind. We need to make our training as realistic as possible. And you need to do that to yourselves. I'm a little worried for y'all, okay? All you creatine eaters and people who hydrate. This is my boy right here, right? My son. Incredible, incredible human being, incredible athlete. But man, he's got to feed that machine constantly. You don't get to feed the machine. You need to test yourself. You need to put yourself in those positions. And you need to have these discussions about these moral injuries and things like that too. Whoop, where did I go? Right there. So this idea of defense. That same slide that I showed you, same thing. This is another takeaway I want you to have. You understand these offensively. You study these. You need to know these inside and out. But you can also apply those to the defense in many, many ways. Because what's the best defense? Offense. When in doubt, attack. So this is your time right now. We didn't have, I asked Mike and I were in these chairs together. Mark back there, we were in these chairs together back in '97 or something like that. We didn't have discussions like this. You have this time now to think through this stuff, talk through it with your peers, talk through it with your teams, platoons, troops, whatever you're working in, and be able to apply these different tactics, okay? Ambush, I'm just gonna pick a couple up here. When you have these thoughts, when you have these moral injury thoughts that begin to creep up, you need to ambush that thing. You need to kill it. You can't sit on it. You can't feed it. You need to kill it. You need to contain and block all of these thoughts and feelings. You need to contain and block those discussions and murmurs when you're seeing them in your platoon and in your companies. It's not, shut up, stop talking like that. It's, hey guys, come in, let's talk about this. You need to learn these tactical tasks so you're proficient on the battlefield, but you also need to learn these tactical tasks and apply them to your spiritual walk. In Panama, jumped in, my main mission to get to the assembly area, grabbing the foothold, moving out to the foothold with a fightable squad, a squad's worth of dudes, and a gun, M60s back then. So as soon as I had that level of firepower, we were off. I was happy to see it was mostly my organic squad, my organic squad. We get up to a guard shack that's between us and our foothold that we're supposed to take, maybe 3-4 times the distance from me to that podium, maybe further than that. It's a road, we're in the ditch. Ranger Hale, 249. Eliminate that threat. There's a guy there shooting at us. Eliminate the threat. He shoots. It's hitting the roof. It's hitting the tin roof. Bring your fire down. Comes down a little bit further. Bring your fire down. He never brings his fire down. It's hitting the roof up here. It's kind of coming into this space. I switch to the 203. Ranger Ray. Eliminate that threat. 203. Boom. Ray was a redneck from Moultrie, Georgia. I don't know what that boy's doing now. I'm afraid to ask. But that dude could knock the wings off of a fly with a 203. He blasted that thing, took care of that threat. The night goes on. I didn't recognize and realize that Ranger Hell wasn't ready to kill a guy. I kind of put him in the back of the stack because it was a saw, not a lot of use for all of this room clearing. It wasn't until earlier that morning when the sun came up, it was about 02, we jumped in, so probably 2-3 hours, maybe as much as 4, we're clearing buildings, and I didn't really think of it. We have a lull, and I go to Ranger Hale, I'm a corporal. I said, Hale, what's going on, dude? When I tell you bring your fire down, you need to bring your fire down. Corporal, I just don't think I can kill a guy. I blew up. I punched him, I knocked him down. You know what I mean? You're a disgrace to the regiment. He ended up doing KP duty the rest of the trip. 30 years later, I'm writing about this in my book. I'm standing there in my room and I'm writing about this, and I finally realized the biggest reason I was pissed was how it reflected on me as a Ranger team leader. And I felt terrible. I think I might have cried a little bit, seriously. Because for 30 years I was angry at Ranger Hale. If you guys know the story about Panama at all, these guys came right out of RIP. They hadn't been trained at all. They came right out of RIP and they came with us. And I remember having this discussion. My first sergeant was Michael Hall. So some of you, hopefully somebody knows Michael Hall. He went all the way up through SOCOM. Incredible. Are there Rangers in here? A couple? You guys know Michael Hall? You know the name? Yeah, he was my first sergeant. I remember sitting down with him, or he was sitting down with all of us, and we said, boss, these guys shouldn't go. They're not ready. He said, guys, we're going to lose dudes. We need bodies. We need bodies. So we took them. I was pissed at Ranger Hale for 30 years until I realized it was my fault. As his team leader, I didn't train him appropriately. Now again, in my defense, I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I didn't understand. Really the bigger thing I'm talking about, and this is what you really have to guard yourself from, is being afraid of how other people see you. I was pissed because I'm supposed to be this super corporal, right? Taking my men into combat, and I've got a guy who's afraid to kill? How is that gonna look on me? Now, was all of this conscious in my mind at the time? No, I'm just pissed. Righteous anger. But those are the kind of things you've got to take a pause and look at. So again, this goes back to this fight, flight, or freeze. You better not freeze, and if you're flighting, there better be a damn good reason why you're flighting. But then I learned the other day this idea of fawn, which you're saying faint. And we're using it because we teach a lot of women how to protect themselves. And for a lot of women, your options are not to fight. Your option is certainly not to freeze. And if you don't have the option of flight, what is it you do? Very often when you read these accounts of assault and rape, the ones that get away is they fawn or they faint. They pretend that they're going along with it. They're pretending that I am interested in your come on. You don't have to hit me. You don't have to stab me. You know what I mean? Let me go put on something nice. So they fawn until they find a way to get away. So we apply that, but you know what dawned on me also? Is there's too many of us in uniform that have the fawn faint. There's too many of us in uniform that are too worried about what our boss is gonna think. You have to work all of that out long before you go down range. And if you're getting rotated in and you don't get a chance to know them, but I'm telling you, yes, it was an afterthought, because I had some tasks, I had some guidance, but that certainly was not my decision. My PTS is more about officers and NCOs that made decisions to please their boss, not because it was the right thing. And when you go become a warfighter, that's what's expected of you, to be a warfighter. Now, fast forward from, that was 1989, fast forward now, maybe 2009. I'm in Iraq again, we're in Hawija, beautiful town, right? Beautiful town, Hawija, those of you that know. I think the devil vacations there. We do a hit, we're at economy of force mission. We pinpoint the objective, we hand it off to 10th Mountain. Things don't go as planned. That's how I get a Silver Star. Things don't go as planned. I can go into that story with you guys later, but you only get Valor Awards when things go wrong, right? But things went horribly wrong. As we handed that off to 10th Mountain, 9 American soldiers were dropped in this courtyard immediately. Firefights ensue. We, guys from the unit, end up taking care of the target, like 5 of us, 4 or 5 of us. There was a company's worth of soldiers there who had been in country for close to a year, didn't really know how to react to 2 machine guns, what had happened in this particular place. So I'm really truncating the story. Everything's done. We're getting ready to exfil. Something moves in the bushes. I turn my weapon over. There's an American soldier lying under the bush. He'd been there for 30 minutes of this gunfight. He crawled out of the bush. He said, "Is it over?" I said, "Yeah, it's over." He was shaking. I grabbed him by the hand, literally by the hand, and I walked him off the objective. Do I defend that guy? No. It made it easier for me to have mercy for him. One, he wasn't my guy. I didn't know him. But more importantly, I was an old soldier already. I had seen different styles and been in combat for, again, on and off for almost 20 years. I understand that that's going to happen. But in my experience, it was very, very, very much the exception. The American warrior is incredible, and the world knows it. Do not mess with us. We haven't experienced an existential threat. The wars that we've been involved in, we've chosen. You've chosen to put this uniform on. It is your responsibility now to put all of these things into play. How you are going to protect your own life, not just yours, but these civilians. And I think that is something that we never understood. The folks that talk about Afghanistan, again, my heart breaks even more for Iraq. I just didn't have the affinity for Afghanistan. When I was there, I didn't really work with them. You know what I mean? They weren't integrated as much. But I ate, slept, partied, you know, with the Iraqis for years. Good people. The world never cared. The world certainly didn't love them. And maybe that was my fault. I loved them. And that was all that came into my play, okay? And I loved them because they were children of God, just like me. Very diametrically opposed in culture, very diametrically opposed in even our faith values. But I'm a protector. And I'm there to protect. And I'm prepared to give limbs for that. I made an agreement with God. I prayed to God, and I said, "Hey, God, I'm fine. Take an arm, take a leg. Even one of each is fine, but make them opposing. You know what I mean? I couldn't imagine a whole half of my body. I said, let me keep this, okay? Nothing here. I said, I will give everything. I will give half my body to this mission, but I want to come home and reintroduce myself to that boy right there. I will deploy and do whatever you ask of me. Keep me alive and let me reintroduce myself to my sons and my wife." And he blessed me with that. So again, it's not lost on me when I say that. He may strike me dead right now. Like, our contract is up. We had an agreement. But just like the boss said, one of the things that is in my mind too is these systems that you create, these processes that you create. And I'm trying to share with you guys some of my own experiences that you can try on. I did not barely ever talk to my wife and family when I deployed. And you have to know and understand that isn't just an option. It's the option we've had through the history of the world. And that's why I did it. I found it easier for me not to be stepping in and out of those worlds. So when I kissed my wife and kids goodbye, I saw them 3, 4, 8 months later when I came home. We had very, very limited contact in between. Have you heard of anyone else doing that before? Anyone else use that as a coping mechanism? I see one hand back there. 2, consider it and talk about it with your wife. And maybe something you guys never considered. But I'm a history buff. And warriors throughout history, they left their families and they came home to their families. They didn't leave their families and read bedtime stories to their kids when they went to bed. They didn't talk about the fact that the dryer's broken or the garage door's broken. I think that's one of the reasons we've got so many people that are divided, because they kept themselves divided. I would call it a distraction. I'm just putting it out there. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, especially with your spouse. By the way, today's my anniversary, 36 years. Yeah, I had to drag that one out. Married my wife at 19 years old. We were supposed to get married on 22 December. I jumped into Panama on 20 December. We missed the wedding. That was probably the first time I remember violating, not an order, but guidance from higher. And as that gunfight was going on, there was a lull in the fighting. We went through this day room of the Panamanian Defense Forces. Big disco ball, you know what I mean? Well, that's pretty cool. There's a phone sitting on the bar. Hold up, guys. 1-800-COLLECT. Jules, my wife's name. Will you accept the charges? Yes, I will. Is that how mom sounds? Yes, I will. That's how she sounded when she was 20. Maybe not now. I said, hey, baby, call mom. There ain't going to be a wedding. I don't know if you know where we are. You're going to figure it out soon. I can't talk. But call mom. There's not going to be a wedding. She needs to start making a phone call and canceling everything. When I got home, about 2 months later, I was standing in front of the company commander's office. Corporal Teagues, I was maybe a sergeant by then. Sergeant Teagues, did you make a 1-800 phone call home in the middle of combat? Roger, sir. Explain yourself. I told him the story. He understood. Honestly, that's the first time that I think I remember ever, not just working in that gray space, but being like, I'm doing this. Again, do you have a reason? Did I have a good reason? I think so. Yeah, no, you don't agree? Yeah, it wasn't the norm, but you have to be able to rationalize what you do. You have to be able to, again, with this idea of falling back to where you are trained. Let's see, where did I want to close? Oh, I know where I want to close. So, this is another one of my favorite verses, and I love doing this. You know, some of you all go to church every Sunday. Some of you have never had a blessing said over you at all. But I love this verse. Those of you that go to church, you know, if you're not a good churchgoer, you don't know where it comes from. It's the Aaronic blessing. This is Aaron. God very specifically told Aaron, by the way, that's my son's name, Aaron, the Aaronic blessing. He told him, I want you to pray this over the Israelites. My fingers are kind of jacked up. Does anyone know what this is? The Spock. Spock, right? Leonard Nimoy? Leonard Nimoy was a Jew. And he was Spock. And he's like, I need some kind of crazy thing that Spock does that's just kind of wazoo. And the old Jewish priests used to do this with both hands. Pretend someone's doing this better. I got broken fingers and hands and stuff like that. So the Spock, the priest would hold up his hands and he would say this blessing. And I want to close with this blessing for you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord, what is it? May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace, his holy shalom. It is truly my honor to share my experiences. Take what works for you and put it in your kit bag. Take what doesn't work for you and put it aside. And it's truly my honor to be able to speak a blessing over all of you. So, thanks a lot. All right. I think some questions at all? No questions? Oh yeah, I left time for questions. All right. A couple of questions? Not you, Anthony. Come on, give me some questions. Yes, sir.
Sir, how did you get to know the Lord, and how do you carry that in a difficult time?
Yeah, by the book. By the book. No, I'm kidding. I write about it at length in the book. And again, the gift that my family gave me, my mom and dad, they raised me. I was baptized as a kid, like as an infant. You know, I was like, pissing myself and getting baptized at the same time. You know what I mean? So I've never struggled with the reality of God. I've never struggled with the reality of Jesus. It's always been like, this is real. This is part of my life. And of course, like every person, I've gone through highs and lows and valleys, and I've kind of put it aside in me. But this is the thing too, if you're one of those people, you know, who maybe you were brought up in the church and you've left it behind, that's okay. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's right there. when you need him, just ask him to help you. So in my life, I've had events of that. He's always there. He's so faithful. So I've tried to live all those things. Again, I go back to, I welcome you guys to go back to that first speaker and list all of those things. Because you don't have to be my faith tradition. Any good faith tradition lists all of those character traits as things that we should emulate. And I've tried to work through those. And I tell you, what it's helped me also is work through betrayal and loss and failure and 40 years in the desert. Does anyone know? Yeah, again, think about this, right? Like when I start to feel sorry for myself, why is this so hard? You've got this story of Exodus. How long were the Israelites in Egypt? 400 years, dude. That's almost twice as long as we've been a country. 400 years they were slaves. And then God does all this miraculous stuff, again, according to my tradition, and they walk out of Egypt, and then what? 40 years they wandered in the desert. What? Like, think about that. So that's where I find that solace. Like 40 years? 40 years? Then the same thing between the Old Testament and the New Testament. How much time went beyond that? 400 years again. So God had this very close relationship with the Israelites. And then he stopped speaking to them, or they stopped speaking to him, probably a combination of both, for 400 years until Yeshua shows up. So again, we talk about the gospel and we talk about all of these things, but man, that is a story. You don't, again, to me, the Bible it's the history, the wars, the tradition, the things that you learn from it, and apply those to your life. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? All right. Another one, please.
You mentioned earlier
Yes.
about the moral injury, and you talked about how you said to squash it, protect against
Yeah.
it. What tools have you used to control and to manage the moral injury that you would otherwise experience?
Yeah. So the moral injury piece, I understand. I don't feel, I definitely, I can find myself gravitating towards it. But one of the things too is you really, again, this goes back to those tactical tasks. You really have to guard yourself against going there. Like the Bible talks it, the fiery darts of the enemy. And one of the things that I would tell you too is when you're conflicted in anything, if it's the fall of Afghanistan, whatever it is that's happening, let's say again, with this imposter syndrome thing, Parvati, you're stupid. You're not good enough. You ain't gonna make it. When you hear those words, which we all hear, is there anything you should have paid attention to when I said that? Was that you saying that or someone else? I said you. Do you look in the mirror and say you? You say I. Okay. And you don't have to believe in the spiritual realm, which I do. But when you're hearing these thoughts of weakness, when you're hearing these thoughts of temptation, look at the tense. I can look at the mirror and say, I'm fat. If I look in the mirror and I hear you're fat, now I put the tactical task of containment. I reject that thought. And that's how I've worked with a lot of this moral injury. When it comes to PTS and TBI, which is really this weird interconnectedness, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to make little of it, but there's aspects of it, and those of you that have gone through this, there's aspects of it that I miss. Because I am fascinated with life. And when these emotions get so heavy, like when you get that whirlwind in your mind, it's unlike anything else. And I could appreciate it when it happened. When I would have these PTS episodes, which I haven't had for many, many, many years, it felt to me like a whirlwind, like literally there was a whirlwind in my head. And I could step outside myself and go, wow, that's cool. That is fascinating. Ride it, surf it. And that's what I talk about, guys. When you have those feelings that seem to be overwhelming, surf it, ride it. Those of you that do jujitsu and you're feeling that pressure, eat it. Some people need to go to counseling, fine. I don't do counseling. I'm old school. I suck it up. And not only but more importantly than sucking it up is I ride it. I appreciate it for what it is. And I appreciate it coming in, and I appreciate it going out. Now, when you're talking about chronic pain, which I'm starting to understand a little bit more, again, God spared me. I got 2 fake hips. I got a bad shoulder. I need to get the meniscus out of my knee anytime. If anyone notices my swagger, that's a limp. I'm sorry, that's a limp. The knee's broke. He took pieces of my body, but I would gladly give those. And if you're not prepared to give pieces of your body for your profession, you're in the wrong profession. Because one of the things that I recognized and understood early, I'm not here to win wars. This is what I would say to these guys with moral injury. I fight. I'm here to fight. It's like a UFC fighter. If you don't enjoy the sound of that cage being locked behind you, then you shouldn't be in the ring. I fight because that's who I am. I'm a fighter. And if you're looking for this kind of idea, the best book that helped me out was not about a soldier. I've read every soldier's book that I can imagine who dealt with these things. The book that helped me the most was by a woman named Maria Coffey. And I believe it's called Where the Mountain Casts Its Shadow, or In the Shadow of the Mountain, one of those two. I think it's Where the Mountain Casts Its Shadow. Maria lost her fiancé to the high mountains. He was an alpinist. And in her grief, she interviewed men and women that had lost their husbands and spouses in the high mountains. And you know what she concluded? They're alpinists. It's what they do. They climb high mountains. And she was attracted to that. I'm not sure if my wife is attracted to the fact that I'm a commando, or whatever word, operator, whatever you want to use, but she knew it going in and she's accepted it. So if you don't understand part of your identity is a commando, is a fighter, is a ranger, is a lieutenant, whatever it is that you're in here doing, an armor officer, if you aren't dreaming about putting that M1, is it M1A1, M1A2, where are we at? Sherman tank. If you're not like just waiting to put that into action, if you don't identify that as you, so again, read that book. It's the best one that I saw. It helped me recognize and understand who I was. And I came to the terms with the fact, I just fight. It's what I do. I win battles. I bring my boys home, but I'm not responsible for winning wars. And there's also a reason I retired at Lieutenant Colonel. Because I don't think Lieutenant Colonels win wars. I don't think our general officers win wars. Our politicians win wars right now. But you gotta love the fight. You gotta love the fight. All right, one more I think? I can go all day. One more. Come on, somebody. Yes, sir.
So we talked about the personal responsibility you have to prepare a soul.
Yeah.
But back to the example you gave in your corporal, so as a leader, how do you prepare, or how would you have done differently to prepare your soldier that when you're in that situation to find that themselves or became?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing, and this may not be exactly what you're looking for, but you have to empower them. You have to give them. You have to let them fail. You know what I mean? Like in this, I'll give a perfect example. When we were doing these aerial assaults, we would swap out duty positions. So the guys that were the snipers in the door would switch helicopters to become the assaulters, et cetera, et cetera. I had a guy on my team, Weedy, mad scientist. Weedy's like, hey, I got this new, because one of the things we do is, come up with all these new tools. I got this new 5.56 round that I think will stop a vehicle, stop an engine block. Does anyone think 5.56 round's going to kill an engine? Anyone in here understand ballistics? Yeah. I don't know what Weedy was thinking. He's like, no, boss, it'll do it. I'm telling you. In combat, I let him use his little 5.56 bullet to try to stop a car. Did it work? No. But it meant more to me in combat to trust him to figure it out himself. So even as a corporal, I would build these exercises where I would let them figure it out themselves, and this level of empowerment. Obviously with Hale, there was a lot more to it. And again, I hope you guys aren't doing this in the Ranger Regiment anymore. The new guy got the saw, right? Because it sucks carrying. But it's the most lethal weapon you have in the squad, and that's how dumb I was. So there's all that training, but again, I think what I would take it to that higher level is you've got to empower your people. You've got to give them control, and you have to stand back and watch it. And then from a very practical sense, I was an adventure racer too. I was an ultra-marathon runner and adventure racer. So I was training for these types of things. One of the things I would do with a buddy of mine is on a Friday night, everyone would come over, we'd have pizza, drink beer, and then we'd go out. And we'd spend the night rucking, navigating, riding our bikes, paddling, get up the next day. Until we rolled into the next day. Because I wasn't just preparing myself. You guys do that? You guys do that? You guys looked at each other. Were you about to kiss? No. But I was an adventure racer. I was an endurance athlete. But the other reason was I was preparing myself for what combat was. And as officers, guys, when in doubt, lean on endurance. I'm very concerned about where the Army's going in the PT test. I've never met a soldier who wasn't strong enough. I've met a lot of soldiers who didn't have the endurance and the cardio to last. So when in doubt, lean on that endurance, lean on that cardio, test yourself in these environments as much as you can, and empower your people. Is that good? Is that all right? All right. Am I still going? Am I getting where's Anthony's crook? You pulling me off the stage? One more.
You can take one more.
One more, okay. One more, please.
Hey, how about a statement?
Yes.
If you guys want to watch the whole thing on mountain climbing, watch YouTube Free Solo. It's a 1-hour documentary instead of reading a long book. Free Solo, it goes over the psychology of it.
Here's the problem with Free Solo. Alex Honnold is way over on the spectrum. Like, he's not just autistic. We can't say the R word anymore. Like, the dude is not, he ain't right. So I'm going to have to push back on that one, boss. Watch it. It's amazing. But if Alex was on my troop, holy crap, dude, he'd be holding my water. Like, that guy ain't. If I need him to scale some wall, yeah. So it ain't a long book either. Check the book out. All right. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Hit me up afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Teagues. At this time, we'll be on a short break. The symposium will resume promptly at 1500. Randall is the founder and president of Vanguard 21, a leadership development and executive coaching company. He has a background in teaching, training, and executive coaching over 17,000 professionals across various sectors, which includes the United States Army and Special Operations. Dr. Randall is an International Coaching Federation professional certified coach and proprietor of 3 ICF coaching courses. He is also an accomplished author of 3 books to include Practicing Excellence, Restoring Civility, Faith, and Trusted Leadership to the Public Square. A United States Military Academy at West Point graduate, he is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, Chaplain, and Ranger. He has 6 combat tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. As an Army ethicist, he transformed ethics and character development curriculum, impacting 30,000 officers and NCOs. He holds 2 master's degrees in divinity and theology and a doctorate of ministry in leadership. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Anthony Randall.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. Hey, how about a round of applause if you've learned one thing today from some of our speakers? It's been a fantastic afternoon. Just so that I know who's out here, where's all my armor folks? A little bit of noise. Where's armor? All right, there we go. Speed and power. All right, where's the infantry guys, gals? All right, okay. We'll see how you all do at the end. All right. See how you do at the end. Good. Well, it's an honor to be here today. Just appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm as tall on Zoom as I am in real life. So this is the best you get right here. Today we're going to talk about something incredibly important. We are going to talk about preparing the soul for war and how to forge a warrior soul. Forging the warrior soul requires 4 principles. And that's what we're going to cover for the next hour. Forging the warrior soul requires preparation, practice, protection, and perseverance. I'm sitting in my pastor's office back in Denver, Colorado, 2005. And one of our exuberant youth jumped into my office. Pastor Anthony, I got it. I know what I want to do with my life. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks about this young man joining the United States military, and he had figured it out. I'm like, what do you want to do? He's like, I'm going to be a United States Marine. And I said, that sounds great. What a great young man, great character attributes like Dr. Kilner talked about today. Understanding the power of love like Colonel Grossman talked about today. And wanting to set himself up for life. An Eagle Scout, volunteered at our church. I was like, man, you'd be a great Marine. So the following week, I took him down to the Marine recruiting station. I dropped him off in the morning. And I met the Marine recruiter, gave him my short background, and he told me, come back in the afternoon to pick up the young man. Aye. So I left for the day. When I came back that afternoon, I found the young man in a chair like this. It had been a long day for the young man. He failed the ASVAB for the Marine Standard. He didn't realize the PT test was going to include pull-ups and a 3-mile run. And it had been a long day for this young guy. And then out the back of the recruiting office, I saw him. Some of you may have seen him. Do we have any Marines in here? Saw some in this morning. The biggest gunny sergeant you've ever seen, right? He's got a high and tight, higher and tighter than yours. It's January in Colorado, but he has a sunburn around his entire face. And he's wearing a Class B Marine uniform, 3 sizes too small. He sits down, and he gives me that look that only non-commissioned officers will give an officer before they're about to drop the mic. Son, what's the motto of the United States Marine Corps? Young man, up in the chair, shoulders back. He's like, Sergeant, you're looking for a few good men. Marine looks at me again. That's right, son. We are looking for a few good men. You're not one of them. My heart splits in two. The pastor heart comes over here, and I just want to give him a hug. I want to tell him God's got a great plan for his life. I want to tell him he's got purpose out there for himself. But the ranger side of my heart wants to go up to that gunny sergeant and say, where do I sign on the dotted line to be a United States Marine? Because the Marines have not changed their marketing or their advertising or their message for over 250 years. They want men and women who will do dangerous and challenging things together in a tight-knit ethos of trust. But there's good news. This time he gives me a different look, looks back at the young man and says, son, he's like, I made a couple phone calls. He's like, just talk to the Army recruiter next door. He's got a 13 Bravo field artillery contract ready for you to sign. And that young man went and signed that contract. And if you go to our hometown today's Army-Navy surplus store, his Army combat uniform is proudly displayed, hanging behind the counter. Combat badge, combat action badge, Sergeant, United States Army. You see, each and every one of you needs to find your tribe. Each and every one of you needs to find your path on how you are going to forge a warrior soul. And some of us will have the same journey. We'll go through some tough and dangerous things together. Maybe it's airborne school or scout school or ranger school or whatever it is. But each and every one of you need to find how you're going to forge your warrior soul. It is your journey, but it's a journey that we do together to be all we can be. It requires 4 steps. It requires preparation. It requires practice. It requires protection. And it requires perseverance. And here's why. Because like you've heard from other speakers today, you are going to face a near-peer threat that fights very differently than we do. And just like the Sergeant Major of the Army said, as Jeff alluded to, we may have gone to combat, but the kind of war that you'll face in large-scale combat operations will be drastically different than anything that us combat veterans saw. So let me take you to the future. It's April 2029. China has warned the United States multiple times that they will retaliate if they continue conducting training operations in the Indo-China Sea, South Pacific. We refuse. And over the last 24 hours, a devastating first strike attack has put the U.S. and allied forces on their heels. Devastating casualties and losses. The inability to fight multi-domain operations. And China has achieved a first strike advantage and battle shock. If you're not familiar with those 2 phrases, you need to go back to doctrine and study it. A young armor platoon leader, she begins to assess the situation around her. She finds 30% casualties, to include her command post, that refused to properly mask their electromagnetic signature, and they've been wiped out. And now she and her platoon sergeant are the acting company commander and first sergeant. They're from the 3rd Infantry Division. They've been attached to the 82nd Airborne Division, and her company is supporting an airborne infantry battalion. She begins to reflect on what got her to this moment. She's been punched in the face before. Matter of fact, she likes it. She's an All-American high school wrestler. She's an All-American collegiate judo player. She followed her dad's steps to West Point in studying the martial way and the martial arts. And she's ready for a fight. She communicates encryptedly to that 82nd Airborne commander. The 82nd Airborne commander is checking out his unit. A surprise PLA air assault and airborne operation has caused significant losses in his company as well. He begins to assess the damage. He begins to consolidate and organize. He begins to move the dead and the wounded to a collection point. And he reflects on his faith. He reflects on what kind of letters he's going to write home to those mothers and fathers, to those siblings, to those next of kin. He likes a good fight too. He's a college rugby player. He goes in the high country of Wyoming and hunts elk in the wintertime through the snow. And he prefers to be a hunter and not the hunted. The commander and the platoon leader link up and they realize they know each other. Her dad was his family's pastor back in Colorado when he was in seminary, and later became his chaplain when he came through OCS, IBOLC, and Ranger School. Immediately there's a bond, there's a courage that surmounts, and they decide to conduct a hasty counterattack against the PLA forces. 1 minute, a ranger officer grabs his static line and prepares to make a proper exit out of a C-17 Globemaster aircraft. His ranger battalion is conducting an airfield seizure on a PLA Chinese atoll. They're going to seize and secure that lodgment and disrupt logistic lines and limit the Chinese ability to project combat power. Green light, go! At 500 feet, he begins to see his rangers seize and secure the objective. Sniper teams take out high-value targets. Explosions going off left and right, and an FLS clearance team clearing the runway to bring in follow-on forces. He reaches for his ranger tab in his left pocket. That ranger tab has been to combat 4 times before. It was given to him at ranger graduation by his brother. That ranger tab was given to him by a Special Forces ODA commander. And that Special Forces ODA commander received that ranger tab from an Army Ranger chaplain. All 4 West Point graduates. All 4 Eagle Scouts out of the same Boy Scout troop. He begins to reflect on the Ranger Creed, that he is a soldier that arrives at cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. That he'll carry on to the Ranger objective, though he be the lone survivor, and he thinks about the legacy of that tab, and he will not fail tonight. He conducts a PLF off the airstrip and moves to his assembly area and moves out. 2 weeks ago, that Special Forces Reserve or National Guard battalion commander, he was working a corporate gig as a senior vice president. But now he finds himself deep behind enemy lines in Indochina. He's working with allied forces and guerrilla forces to do unconventional warfare and disrupt enemy lines of logistics and communication. He too, like the platoon leader, like the company commander, like his ranger buddy, is a man of faith. He's been in fights before. He did several tours in Afghanistan. He's fought an ideological enemy before, one that oppresses humanity's ability to flourish. He wonders how this enemy may be different. This enemy that uses Marxism and Confucianism to worship the state more than to honor the human soul. An enemy that has disrupted his nation's economy, an enemy that has stolen defense technology, an enemy that has mastered the use of social media to re-engineer the American mind. And he thinks to himself, what's next? He bows his head in prayer and asks for God's peace and strength to continue his mission. Now, this scenario is notional, right? But it's being taught right now. This exact doctrine and scenario is being taught right now at the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. That company commander that I mentioned to you, he's fighting this battle right now, this week, at JRTC. All 4 of the people that are in this scenario are real people. I've mentored them, I've coached them, I've built lifelong relationships with them. And one of them is my own flesh and blood. What unites us is how we forged a warrior soul. What unites us is the fact that we all have a theological conviction that helps us understand the problem of evil and how to be a leader of trusted character. What unites us is a philosophical construct of virtue and value and character. What unites us is an existential view on how to pursue human flourishing. You see, that's what unites us as warriors in this fighting force for this nation. Is that there is a way. You saw the structure today by Dr. Kilner. You saw the practical application by Colonel Teagues. There is a way that we train and fight and win our nation's wars. And it requires 4 things: preparation, practice, protection, and perseverance. Listen up, warriors. If we fail to prepare our souls for war, you expose the human soul to unknown evils that you have not yet experienced. And for those of us in combat who have, and you will darken and kill that soul. If we fail to practice forging the warrior soul, when we do that, you surrender your moral imperative as a non-commissioned officer and commissioned officer in this force to teach and train your men and women to forge a holistic, whole-person, human performance warrior that goes out there and fights and wins our nation wars. If you fail to protect your formation, you will compromise your character and the culture of your team and the ability to build trust and cohesion and fight and win. And if we fail to persevere as warriors because of the health of our souls in war, it significantly, as we've seen and heard about today, diminishes veterans' abilities to reconnect with their families and reintegrate with their communities and inspire and motivate the next generation to serve. So how do we respond? What's the response that we owe to forging the warrior soul? Well, let's talk a little bit about it. So if you want to write it down, the first step is preparation. How do we prepare the soul? And what happens when we don't? Now, it's any given night, it's Iraq 2007, and I'm rolling out with one of my favorite platoons in our unit. Matter of fact, one of them sitting in here today. I didn't know he was going to be here. They're gritty, they're tough, and they get stuff done. We hit the target, we accomplish our mission, and towards the end of it, we're separating the military-age males from the women and children. I'm standing next to one of the security Humvees, and the gunner in the turret yells out to the NCO, "Hey, Sergeant, save one of the hot chicks for me." Now, I'm 51 now, but back in the day, I could move. You've never seen a chaplain and kit scale the side of a Humvee so fast in your life. I grabbed that kid's carrying handle by the back of his body armor, and I yanked him out of that turret. And in the dark of that Iraqi night, we had a very close come to Jesus moment. Because a year before that, there was an issue in South Baghdad. It came out in the book called Black Hearts, where a poorly trained and poorly cohesive unit allowed some soldiers permissiveness to rape and kill a young girl and her entire family. We returned back to the patrol base, and he comes and sees me. He's apologetic. He's remorseful. "Chaplain, I don't know what came over me. I'm not sure what just happened, but I've got a wife and 2 young girls at home, and I just started thinking about what if someone kicked my door into my house and said something like that about my daughters." He came to confess. He needed a space to execute what we call contrition, taking ownership and accountability for what you've done and accepting the culpability that we can all do evil. He came to seek absolution from the warrior priest, which he received. And we hugged and reconciled. Now, about 10 years later, I'm conducting a funeral at Fort Mitchell. I always inspect the honor guard. I go out there to inspect, and that E7 spins around and gives me a sharp salute, and then this giant smile wraps around his head, and he gives me this giant hug. And he says, "Sir, I will never forget that night in Iraq. It changed my life." He updated me on now his wife and grown daughters. E7 promotable to master sergeant, and he at the time was an ABOLIC instructor. And when you go out to the force today, he is very likely possibly one of your battalion or brigade command sergeant majors. And I guarantee you this, he has learned over time how to prepare his soul for war. And as a result of that, now as a senior NCO, knows how to practice forging a warrior ethos and practice forging a warrior soul and protecting it and persevering it for not only him but his force. Now, I'm a retired chaplain, but still a chaplain all the same. So with your permission, I'm going to put my chaplain hat on for a second. how do we address the problem of evil? Colonel Grossman alluded to it a little bit today. We're going to do a little bit deeper dive. How do we address the problem of evil? So for me, it starts with a theological foundation, right? I'm a chaplain that comes from the Christian faith. So for me, theologically, I believe that there is a God that created us in his perfect image, the Imago Dei. We were created for good. But because evil entered the world, and through man's free will and volition, to reject God's truth and knowledge for a false promise of worldly truth and knowledge, we fell into this separation and this chasm between creator and creation called sin. This propensity to do evil. And so the God that I believe in, he responded. And the way he responded was through the life and the death and the resurrection of Christ. And so my theological conviction shapes me as a warrior because my understanding is that on that cross at Calvary, good met evil head on. And the ultimate good of a just and a loving God defeated a subordinate evil. So now I can understand that I serve a God, and Colonel Teagues referred to this, a God of justice and also a God of love. That helps me form my understanding of how to address evil and how to fight and win as a warrior. I wasn't always a chaplain. I started out as an engineer officer in the 82nd Airborne Division, right? That helps me understand that. Great, thanks. One of the benefits of being the last speaker today, I was to drain the batteries. No worries. So that helps me establish a foundation for then my philosophy. Dr. Kilner did a great job with that today, didn't he? How many of you guys enjoyed that structure of character? And so how do I shape my character? It comes from virtues. Where do I get my virtues from? I get them from Platonic philosophy. And Platonic philosophy from the Greeks and then Roman Stoicism teaches me that there's four major ones. There's courage, there's justice, there's wisdom, and there's temperance. And then I understand that the Roman Stoic, Cicero, had a significant influence on two Christian theologians, Augustine and Ambrose. And those two philosophers were very, very key in developing what we know today as just war theory. And so I take these principles of the Apostle Paul and then the Italian humanist and Catholic theologian St. Thomas Aquinas mentioned of faith, hope, and love, and I have 7 cardinal virtues that shape who I am. And who I am is shaped on how I think, and how I think is demonstrated in how I lead. If you want to understand who you are as a person of character, like you've heard about today, it's 3 questions. Who are you as a person of trusted character? How do you think critically, morally, and ethically? And how do you lead? And how do you lead with transformational leadership? Make sense? That's me. That's my worldview. My challenge to you is, what is your spiritual belief system? What is your philosophical belief system that helps you address what is evil? Now that's called a theodicy. A theodicy of evil is simply understanding our spiritual or theological foundation, philosophical approach, existential view on how we resist evil and how we respond to evil. And that's an incredibly important thing to understand, ladies and gentlemen, because if you don't understand how to resist evil internally and respond to evil internally, it's going to be more difficult to do it externally. Make sense? So we have this theodicy of evil. Asking the question, why does evil exist? I guarantee you, I haven't ever talked to a soldier in combat that asked me, Chaplain, why does evil exist? Guess what you know in combat? When you smell the smells that Colonel Grossman talked about today, and you do the things that some of these warriors have done, you know evil exists. It's real, and it's in your face. So the right question as a warrior to ask is, how do I resist it, and how do I respond to it? Does that make sense? That's the question you want to ask. And so if I truly believe in this God of total justice and total love, then that allows me as a warrior to exercise love for my brother and sister on my left and right, to be willing to sacrifice and fight and win with them. It allows me to love civilians. It allows me to exercise our just war principles of proportionality and discretion. And even as a case, and I don't know if you recognize that Colonel Teagues today gave you an example of double effect, but that's exactly what that mission was. And if you don't know what proportionality or discretion or double effect are in the use in bello principle of just war, you need to go back and hit the books. And I'm not talking about a YouTube video. You need to get in the books and read. Make sense? So when you have that structure and that formation, now I can begin to understand things on a greater level. So one of the people I've had the joy of working with over the years is the ethicist, not just Chaplain Vineyard, who's a world-class ethicist, but the ethics chair at CGSC is Dr. Shannon French. Anybody ever heard Dr. French? And she wrote a wonderful book called The Code of the Warrior. Has anyone read The Code of the Warrior? All right. Impulse buy it on Amazon right now. Be good for you. And this is what Dr. French discovered. Out of every warrior class throughout all of history, every warrior class ties their warrior ethos and the health of their warrior soul back to their cultural beliefs and their religious beliefs. Well, why is that? Well, because killing is an incredibly spiritual act. When you kill another human being, it's a spiritual act because you're a spiritual being. You have a soul. It's a spiritual act that's then cognitively processed in the soul, and then it's manifested in physical violence. And that's why you have to have a proper justification and understanding of what is evil. So internally, we've got to get that right first. How do I address the problem of evil internally? And then externally, we have boundaries for that, again, through Cicero and Ambrose and Augustine and other writers. We have just war theory. How many of you read Just and Unjust Wars by Michael Walzer? It's awesome, like 6 people. That's great. Another impulse buy on Amazon. If you have not read Just and Unjust Wars, you might want to do that because the next fight that you're going to fight against the near-peer adversary is going to be what he wrote about 40 years ago in the 80s. And in Just and Unjust Wars, Walzer says this: just war theory is a just license to kill. So we have to understand these things. So what I'd like you guys to do is write down a couple questions for me. Now, I'm going to have all the guest speakers over at our house tonight. We're going to have this amazing chicken curry that my wife makes, and then we're breaking out cigars, some really good bourbon around a fire pit, and we're going to tell stories, and it's going to be epic. 50-year-olds can tell pretty good stories. How many of you guys like Jeff's stories today, right? I've known Jeff for 15 years. I was privileged to be his chaplain in Special Missions Unit. I love listening to Jeff's stories. Got to do jiu-jitsu with him and his 8-time UFC submission son this morning at my house, in our dojo in our house, right? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pain. I'm still breathing. It's all going to work out. They're doing a seminar this weekend. Come talk to them if you want to come train. So what I want to ask you guys is this. How do you answer these 5 questions? Go and write them down. The first question that I want you to address today is the problem of evil internally. And you need to answer this question for you. How do you define evil through your own spiritual, philosophical lens? I've had the privilege to study all the world religions in the world and work with all sorts of chaplains of different religious traditions and work with different people of different faiths in countries all over the world. Each of us have this understanding. What is yours? Because if you want to forge your warrior soul, you have to know who you are first in the soul. Second question. What's the most evil feeling you've ever experienced in your soul? We're not going to be sharing with people on our left and right now. This is for you. Think about it. What's the most evil thing you've ever felt that you wanted to do when rage and vengeance and malice took over? Number 3, how did it manifest? What's the most evil thought that you've ever had and cognitively processed about doing? And then lastly, what's the most evil act you've ever committed? And I guarantee you, to include one chaplain each up here on stage, has probably done something evil in their life. The reason why I want you to address these 4 questions is because the way you answer them is going to help you understand how you resist evil and how you respond to it. Or more importantly, how you've resisted it or not resisted it, and how you probably need to resist and respond to it in the future. We need to understand that we're all capable of doing very evil things to other good people. Moral psychology and studies on the human brain and all those kind of things have demonstrated that. We need to understand that capability. We need to understand that black hearts can happen. There is a reference here today about someone mistreating a POW. I've been around all sorts of EPWs in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I've also been in units where there's been some things done illegally and inappropriately, and those people were taken care of and jurisdicted correctly. We're all capable of it. Now, how do we turn the table on this? We turn the table by having Dr. Kilner come back up again today and talk, right? We talk about how do we build trusted character, what Chapel and Vineyard talked to you instructors about. And so once we address the problem of evil internally, then we have to assess what virtues ground you as a leader of character. Do you remember Dr. Kilner said? Values is something that we're like, yeah, that sounds good. Virtues is when you internalize it and you make it a habit every day. See, I'm taking notes, Dr. Kilner. Or maybe I taught this too for a few years. Second, what morals shape your behavior and your habits and your decision-making process? If you're not writing them down with your arms crossed, Lieutenant, you're probably wrong. I used to be a ranger chaplain, bro. I'll wake you up in the middle of chapel, make you do push-ups so you can listen to the gospel. It's an easy day in here today. Right, Brandon? All right. How does the Army ethos provide an ethical framework for you? We have an Army profession. We have a professional ethic. It creates that structure that Dr. Kilner was talking about today. And then finally, how do you resist and respond to evil? You see, there's a way to resist and respond to evil inappropriately when we allow evil to consume us. But when we understand that good is greater than evil, evil is only a derivative of good and can never be equal to good. And when we believe in some sort of philosophical or spiritual belief system, like the one I shared with you, I understand that I serve a God that is wholly just and wholly loving. That gives me a great deal of confidence in my critical thinking and my moral and ethical decision-making process and how I lead. So those are 8 questions that you guys can kick around with each other, right? Why is this important? On the preparation piece, then we're going to make a pivot. 2010, I had the privilege to serve in special missions with Jeff. And our commander gave us a task. Chaplains, we want you to build a holistic operator resiliency program. Go get the psychologist, go get the docs, go get the strength and conditioning, go get the nutritionist, go get the chiropractor, go get everyone that does holistic human performance. And we did, and we built this holistic operator system. You today know it as H2F. We were working on that 15 years ago. And one of the things that we were going to teach as chaplains in this course was just war theory. I mean, what a better thing to teach as a chaplain, right, to a bunch of operators. And I was the one that was first up. And so we were doing this with redeployed squadrons. So we had this squadron of operators in there. Now, you got a squadron of operators sitting in a room in 2010. They've probably killed thousands of people with everything from hatchets to Hellfire missiles. And I get up there and I give them a brief on just war theory. We finish. One of our senior operators walks up to me. He's a strong man of faith. Slaps me on the shoulder. Good shit, chaplain. But I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing and being right doing it if I didn't have that already figured out before I ever came to this organization. How many of you guys heard Colonel Teague say that today too? You see, our soft community, our high performance units that are out there in the Army, it's not because they got the best gadgets and the best tools and the greatest uniforms. It's because they first and foremost have forged their warrior souls. That operator could do what he could do. Jeff could do what he could do because they figured this stuff out when they were sitting in these seats right here when they were young lieutenants and captains and young NCOs. Does that make sense? So we removed the just war theory from the teaching. It went a lot better after that. They taught us a thing or two. So When it comes to preparing the warrior soul, it begins with understanding that you have to have a theodicy, a philosophy of how to address evil, how to resist it, how to respond to it, and how to build your character. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk a little bit about how do we practice a warrior soul. How many of you guys have seen this sign? There you go. That's the Ranger Standard. If you're not that, you can probably get through Ranger School. If there's any bit of that in you, you ain't gonna make it. I had the privilege to work out of there for a couple of years. I worked there from 2013 to 2015. And at that time, we got a visit in 2013 by the Chief of Staff of the Army. At the time, it was General Odierno. And he came in with his whole entourage because they were highly, highly interested on how we were gonna integrate women into Ranger School. And here was the problem in 2013, late 13, early 14. Our graduation rate had dipped into the 30 percentile. 30 percentile graduation rate. It's typically between 40 and 50%. And they want to know why. Because bean counters and staffers in Washington, D.C. were taking a look at the United States Army Ranger School, the premier leadership school in the United States Army, and wondering, why are we funding a school that only has a 30% success rate? Ranger School, which is a leadership school. You guys want to know how to graduate Ranger School? It's 3 things. How do you lead yourself? How do you lead your peers? And how do you lead your teams? That's it. I've heard recently there was a commander over the last few years that wanted to write a document on how to give tips and tricks and techniques to potential Ranger students to help them get through Ranger School easier. Man, I'm so thankful that document wasn't published. That document's for the weak and the faint-hearted. So here's what happened. My colonel looked at him and took a big breath. Now I'll give you the backstory. In April of 2011, the United States Army made a decision to allow any MOS in the Army to go to Ranger School. Back in my day, I'm class 597, you had to be a combat arms to go to Ranger School, or you had to get a special dispensation as a combat support guy or gal, or that guy back then, to go to Ranger School. But in 2011, they opened the aperture. They said anyone in the military can go to Ranger School. And what coincided with that at the same time was, because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we didn't have the budget or the manpower to continue to run pre-Ranger courses. Now, back in the day, we had division pre-Ranger courses. If you wanted to go to Ranger School, you had to first go through your division's pre-Ranger program. Because what they were looking for was, do you have the quality and the capabilities, do you have the capital and the potential to endure the rigorous Ranger School? So this is not the first time the Army's done it, and it probably won't be the last, but the Army took a transactional approach to what they thought was a systemic problem. Open the aperture and let anybody go to Ranger School, and then remove all of the gates that we use to assess and select the right quality of candidate to attend. And you wonder why their graduation rate went down to the low 30 percentile. You see, transactional leadership and solving systemic issues places lowering standard and equity over character and higher standards and giving everyone the equal opportunity to graduate a Ranger School. Does that make sense? A transformational approach is maintain or increase the standards and then challenge people's character and draw potential out of them to excel and get better. So, back to my commander. He looks the Chief of Staff of the Army in the eye and he goes, "Sir," he said, "when your division commanders," first of all, he said, "Sir," he said, "the Ranger School standard has not changed in over 50 years. He said, "What's changed is the quality and character of student that comes through our gates. So when your division commanders begin sending us the quality of character of student who can meet the Ranger standard, our graduation rates will once again increase." Colonel to a 4-star general. Man, all my stuff that God gave me, my stuff was up in my throat. You know what I'm saying? Because I was sitting right behind him. I'm kind of dodging the Chief of Staff of the Army's eye, looks at me, right? And the General Ordinary looked at him and said, "You got it. We'll do that." And they stood the PRCs back up. And over the next couple of years, I was privileged to be on a staff that found the right way to integrate women into Ranger School. In 2015, we had our first female graduate. I've had the privilege to pin Ranger tabs on friends of mine that are female infantry officers. And today, over 150 women have graduated United States Ranger School. Why? Because we opened the floodgates and reduced the standards and chose an equitable solution? No, because we maintained the standard and we said, send us leaders of character who in this place is not for the weak or faint-hearted. Make sense? So all you that are nervous about going to Ranger School, do PT, do what Colonel Teague said. Get off the creatine, get off the supplements, because your body's going to go into serious deprivation there. Can you endure? He and I walked through a gym in JBLM last year. We were running a jiu-jitsu seminar for some soldiers. Man, I saw so many top-heavy dudes dragging sleds and doing deadlifts and lifting weights. First comment both of us made was, I bet they couldn't make it a 20K in 2.5 hours. But that's what we need you to do, right? So that's how we do it. That's how we practice the warrior ethos institutionally. You guys are familiar with the Army operation concept? Institutional, operational, personal development, right? If we want to increase our Army's being all we can be, and we want to forge the warrior soul, then we must practice at the institutional and the operational space transformational leadership and character development. Make sense? Right. Now, how do you do it individually? Because many times that three-legged stool gets knocked over because of our personal practice. Our personal practice. Ukraine and Russia, trench warfare. The Israeli Defense Force against Hamas and Hezbollah, subterranean environments. Urban warfare, city streets. You are all in a profession of arms, infantry and armor, that to this day, as much as we've seen on the battlefields in Ukraine and what we've seen in the Middle East with AI and machine learning and drones and FPVs and UASs and all of those things, those are awesome. And I'm glad that you guys have all the technology, because my daughter's going to be an armor officer. I want her to have all that cool technology too. You know what I'm saying? I just want her to be able to focus on commanding a tank platoon and killing the enemy. But none of that technology will ever replace your ability as an infantry or armor soldier to close with and kill the enemy and achieve close combat overmatch. At the end of the day, your job is to achieve close combat overmatch. And so you have to learn how to fight in close spaces. So several years ago when Lieutenant General Donahue was our infantry commandant here, he wanted to develop a manual, an ATB on subterranean operations. Who's read the sub-T manual? So I had a privilege to write part of that manual. I was asked to write the psychological and spiritual repercussions of fighting underground. Now, every culture in the world, what's underground? Hell, death, right? And what we have found that in sub-T spaces, through interviewing all sorts of people, I had the privilege to interview 2 IDF officers who were here at CCC at the time. They were both subterranean commanders against Hamas in a couple of the conflicts that they had. And what they attributed their ability to achieve close combat overmatch in a sub-T space was the fact that they train consistently in Krav Maga. Krav Maga is an incredible martial art. It's the martial art of the IDF. Do you know the PLA has a martial art? It's called Jinshu Sinda. PLA Army is trained to kill each and every one of you every day. Not once for a 3-week course, not for a 40-hour course so you can get a certificate. Every day they're trained to kill you to achieve close combat overmatch. So, in the institutional and operational space, one of the most important things I believe we can do to practice the warrior soul is getting punched in the face. Now, the majority of us in here probably need to get punched in the face more. I've studied martial arts for 30 years. I have 3 black belts. I have a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I got to roll with Aaron and Jeff this morning. Guys, close combat overmatch is going to require you, especially you infantrymen and women, to close with and kill the enemy. The combatives program, the Modern Army Combatives program, and the Special Operations Combatives program is phenomenal. And it shouldn't just be a one-time course. It's not something you send one person to, commanders or sergeant majors or first sergeants. It's something that you implement into your PT plan every single week. I've heard all the reasons. I'll call them excuses. Oh, it's too risky. People get hurt. If I had the MCCC captains in here, you know how many MCCC captains I used to watch get hurt playing ultimate frisbee for cohesion and trust? And do you know how many times those ultimate frisbee games out there actually turn into fistfights? And how many times maybe the ethics chaplain might have been in one of those fistfights? You guys are bred to fight. Why are we playing ultimate frisbee? Combatives is free. You can do it anywhere. And I know for a fact, because my daughter's at West Point, Matt Larson, who's a friend of mine and Jeff's, is running an incredible combatives program there. And every lieutenant comes out of West Point as a combatives level 1 instructor. And so your platoon PT plan should include combatives at least once a week, if not twice a week. Because here's the deal with the martial way. Here's the deal with combatives training or any combat art. I don't care, boxing, play rugby. Do something that enables you to hit someone and someone can hit you back. Take something that creates grit and grind and hustle. This is what I found. There's a great book called The Book of Five Rings. Who's read that book before? Good, I've got some Book of Five Rings guys written by a guy named Musashi. Musashi was a legendary samurai and swordsman. He wrote this book in 1645, and he writes in the book, everything I teach you in this book on how to fight with a sword, you can defeat a one-on-one opponent, and you can also defeat people at scale strategically. And in chapter 2 of that book, which is a book on water, he talks about the importance that great warriors are adaptable in their environment, number 1. Number 2, he talks about the fact that warriors have to have a fixed gaze and focus on their enemy. They have to have a proper posture, and they have to have a stance. He calls a fighting stance, and he says a fighting stance is no different than an everyday stance, because every day you should be in a fighting stance. He talks about the pliability and work of the sword, not too loose, not too tight. And then he talks about the importance of footwork. Now, how many of you could take those principles I just shared with you and implement those into a 5-paragraph operations order? Adaptability, focus. What's that? Whatever they call that thing now? Cocock, whatever it is, right? Used to be a coca when we were around. So again, the martial way is an incredible way to train personally, and it's an incredible way to train cohesion and trust and ethos in your formations. How many of you have done combatives? Raise your hand. How many of you train outside of that 40-hour course? Raise your hand. That's awesome. There's a handful of you. You guys will have a tighter, more cohesive, more higher trusting team than anyone else because you're going to physically make each other, push each other in a safe environment to make each other better as warriors. Right? So here's 4 things that you can take away from that. How do we practice the warrior soul? How do we forge the warrior soul? 4 things I've learned over my life. Working in special operations organizations, I spent 8 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I've helped 2 NCAA men's national championship basketball teams reach the Final Four and win the championship. And today I'm in the corporate executive boardroom. Every high-performance organization, there's 4 things that I found that they do really well. 1 is disciplined obedience. Disciplined obedience, if you want to write that down. In the original Hebrew, there is no word for the English word obedience except the word shema. And shema means to listen. Who are you listening to? What are you listening to? I've rattled off a handful of books today. So have some other folks here. Did you write them down? I know YouTube's easy. I know watching videos doesn't take a lot of intellectual effort. And if you've ever read Dan Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, thank you, Colonel Garvin, who he and I served together in combat. Are you stretching your mind to be intellectually rigorous, or are you allowing it to just think easily? You need intellectual rigor. Disciplined obedience. Number 2, train your trust and trust your training. The most well-trained, most cohesive, highly effective units that I've ever served in combat with had an incredibly tight training regimen. They trained their trust, they trusted their training, and then they executed. I mean, I was a chaplain, but I was a ranger chaplain. It takes a lot of work to take the ranger out of the chaplain. It's easier to put the chaplain in the ranger. But I'll tell you what, when I rolled out with Brandon's patrol, or when I would roll some of these guys over here, I went as a non-combatant. And I chose to roll with the units that I knew I could trust because they've trained their training, and they trust their trust. Make sense? Number 3, the hard routine. I had the privilege to spend a little bit of time with the 2-2 SAS. And what I learned from the hard routine, the SAS, was this. They study what's called the hard routine. The hard routine is simply this. They do this much more every day than everyone else. I've coached and worked with Olympic athletes, MLB MVPs, some of the most highest performing athletes in the world. And this is what I found. You know why they're the GOATs? You know why they do things better than everyone else? It's not because they make these huge jumps and because they have all this natural talent. It's because they do this much more than you today, and they do this much more than you tomorrow, and over time, longitudinally, this much more creates a chasm between mediocrity and between practicing a life of excellence, which is a great book, by the way, over there. The 4th one is this. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys need to show up, and you need to play up, and you need to finish every day. Every day, right? I know it's hard. It's hard to show up, play up, and finish every day. It's hard to bring your A game every day. But trust me, I still at 51 do not stretch out in the morning and go, man, I hope I suck today. It just doesn't happen, right? So train your trust and trust your training. I've had 7 surgeries, 5 back procedures. I still do jiu-jitsu 4 days a week. I still ruck 3 days a week in some very old man running shoes. And I still try to lift twice a week because you know what? That makes everything hurt. But you know what would hurt more is if I didn't continue to forge my warrior soul through that physical and mental and emotional practice. Cool? Here's a lesson that we can learn. Josephus was a great Jewish historian. He watched the Romans sack Jerusalem in 70 AD. And he began to study the Roman army. And this is what he found about the Roman army and why they were so lethal and effective and one of the greatest forces of all time. He said they don't sit with folded hands in peacetime to put them in motion in the hour of need. On the contrary, their exercises are unbloody battles, and their battles are bloody exercises. As you get ready to take your platoons or your companies, what's your training going to look like? I hope you take a word from a great historian, Josephus. Number 3, protect. Protect. How do we protect the warrior soul? We've got to protect the warrior soul through our codes and our creeds, through just war principles, through character. But protecting your warrior soul is about creating an ethos and a culture and trust in your organization that allows you to both be the most lethal and effective fighting force on the battlefield today. In 1990, there was a young captain in Germany. His name was H.R. McMaster. He got a reputation pretty quickly. He was highly intellectual. He studied a ton of military history. He was aggressive, tenacious, and he was always looking for a good fight. And in 1990, his unit, Eagle Troop, 2nd Squadron of the 2 ACR, deployed to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Now, in 1994, Captain H.R. McMaster was Cadet Randall's military history professor. And he would remind us that his squadron commander used to explain to people that HR is like a Tasmanian devil. You put him in a cage, and you only break him out in case of emergencies. On February 26, 1991, they broke H.R. McMaster out, and he unleashed hell. How many of you have studied the Battle of 73 Easting? You know the deal. Gets to 72 Easting, recognizes reverse slope defense, realizes an Iraqi Republican Guard battalion's back there. Found out later that that commander graduated from the United States Army Command and General Staff College. And so he pushes forward with surprise, speed, and violence of action, just like Colonel Teague's talked to you about today. And they took out over 80 Iraqi vehicles. They killed over 1,000 Iraqi enemy. And through proportionality discretion, they also took 1,300 POWs. They didn't lose a single life, American life, and they didn't lose a single American tank. The battle lasted 23 minutes. Now, if you've studied now Lieutenant General retired H.R. McMaster's career, his tenacity his intellect, his creativity, his aggressiveness, it gave him a pretty good career. It also set him back a few times. And today, whether it was him as a troop commander or the former national security advisor, he hasn't changed. Most of us study this battle. Most of us study this as a classic combined arms, maneuver. But if you really want to know why this battle was won, you don't study the battle. You study the soul of the warrior behind the battle. You study the fact that this guy is from South Philly. Anybody from Philly? It is not the city of brotherly love. It's the city of who wants to get some on, right? He goes to West Point. He's an Army rugby player. I got any rugby players in here? Man, that's a tough sport. Becomes an Army Ranger and continues on through his career. Protecting the warrior's soul is about understanding how to implement doctrine with speed, surprise, and violence of action. Now, how many of you heard of the doctrinal principle called mission command? Right? How many of you could rattle off the 6 principles of mission command right now? Okay, build cohesion and trust, create shared understanding, provide a clear commander's intent. There you go. You guys are catching on. Really good. Exercise discipline initiative, use mission orders, and accept prudent risk. Yeah, if you didn't know those 6 principles of mission command, again, please go back to your doctrine and write them down. Because that wasn't just something that some general, wrote in a doctrine somewhere so they get promoted. Those are actually 6 principles of high-performance leadership. Every high-performance team that I've ever had the privilege to serve in understands those principles of high-performance leadership. And Eagle Troop is a perfect example of that. It was founded on cohesion and trust, a shared understanding, a clear commander's intent. It was founded upon exercising disciplined initiative, not shiny object initiative, disciplined initiative. Clear mission orders, and accepting prudent risk. There's a major paradigm shift that you young warfighters are going to have to make different than us for the last 20 years. We lived in a war that was about averting risk. In a large-scale combat operation against near-peer adversaries, you're going to have to learn how to exercise prudent risk, and you're going to have to learn how to exercise proportionality and discretion with absolute audacity and violence to kill the enemy. You cannot be risk-averse in a LISCO operation, especially against the enemies that we face. Risk aversion is in the past. How do you accept prudent risk and defeat your enemy? No different than 73 Easting. So, how do you protect your organization? How do you protect your platoon and your company? How do you protect your squad? You exercise disciplined initiative, not as doctrine, but as leadership principles. So I want to ask you, what's your plan to build cohesion and trust in your platoon or your company? Combatives might be a good idea. Rucking so you can endure it might be a good idea. Gunnery, weapons qualification, all the basic things you do, but how can you use it as a place to create cohesion and trust? Number 2, how do you create a shared understanding? What kind of values and virtues do you play out there as character of what this organization's all about? Right? Go down the list. So that's how we do it organizationally. You see, that protects the soul of your warriors. Just like Jeff read all the higher up orders that he was given, right? It protects your soul, no different than what Tito was talking about today. It protects your soul when you have a clear and concise mission and you know you have the just and the right action to execute it. Okay? This is why it's important. Because in war, like Jeff said, there is gray area. And so again, protecting the soul comes down to understanding the problem of evil. It's 2011, Afghanistan. I'm on a small outstation with our special missions unit. I hear the little birds coming back. It's been another night, another successful target killing Al-Qaeda. I hear my door, dunk, dunk, dunk. Before I can say enter, this operator is standing in front of me. I'm like, what's up, man? He's like, chap, I need to talk. Now, I'd gotten to know him for a couple years. Had the privilege to do his wedding, get to know his family. Phenomenal guy. I said, what's up? Just need to know if I'm good. Define good. he begins to unpack with me that on that target, as they took out multiple enemy combatants, he unloaded a lot of rounds on an individual dude. Now, these guys can put you down with 1 or 2 rounds. And they will liberally exercise more rounds if necessary. But something snapped in him that night. And he went past that righteous anger and that righteous justice, and he experienced malice and vengeance in his soul. And he killed that enemy with excessive force. Now, did he expose or threaten any of his teammates by doing that? No. Did he kill the enemy? Yes. Most importantly, did he stop? And the answer is yes, he stopped. And he recognized that he messed up what he considers being good. Self-regulation, self-discipline, self-management, right? Everything down to the trigger squeeze. But we recognized even deeper was that he potentially created a moral injury in his soul. Chap, I just need to know, am I good? I don't know. Are you good? His gaze comes off of me and his gaze goes internal. I begin to see him searching his soul internally. I see confession. I see contrition. Remember we talked about contrition is? It's the ability to accept responsibility and take ownership for your actions. That you are culpable of doing evil things. And what's he coming to me for? That warrior priest absolution and forgiveness. He kind of snaps out of it, looks back at me. I said, I think you're good. I gave him the absolution he was looking for. And then he said this, and this is super important, and this is what an important process of forging the warrior soul. He looked at me and he said, thanks, chap. I'm good. I'm good. Warriors, you need to understand how to resist and how to respond to the problem of evil. And every warrior class, there's a wonderful book written on the treatment of warriors from medieval times to the modern age. And every warrior class studied has some sort of spiritual, philosophical practice or exercise to allow warriors, when they return home, confession, contrition, absolution, and forgiveness. But here's the most important thing that you can do to prevent moral injury. You have to be able to forgive yourself. Now, I serve a pretty big God, a God of justice and love. And if he could have forgiven all of humanity for rejecting him, I hope that you have enough grace in your life to forgive you. One of the most powerful things I heard today was from Tito. Moral injury does not begin with therapy, it begins with clarity. And one of the greatest aspects of clarity that you can have as a warrior is the ability to forgive yourself. And that's just not, I'm sorry, I'm good, moving on. No, it's a spiritual process. It's a spiritual practice that's in every faith that I know of contrition, of confession, contrition, absolution, and forgiveness. Does that make sense? All right. Be able to forgive yourself. And seek out in your own philosophy, your own spiritual traditions, who can absolve you of those things as well. The last one we'll cover today is perseverance. Perseverance. There's 3 things I want to cover with you on perseverance. Relationships, relics, and rituals. Relationships. In 1998, I walked into our company headquarters and I was told, LT, you're getting a new platoon sergeant. And up against the wall was the biggest, burliest dude with dark curly hair and a big bushy mustache with PT clothes way too small for him, leaning against the wall. So I got all my lieutenant muster up, and I'm like, how you doing, Sergeant? I'm Lieutenant Randall. And with the same easygoing smile that I've seen him do in a bloody uniform, to a suit and tie. He's like, hey, how you doing? My name's Larry. I'm like, Larry? He's like, what's your name? I'm like, it's Anthony. And Larry Boyven became the best platoon sergeant a young lieutenant could ever have. Larry Boyven went on to be one of the first special operators that was a master breacher. And he did things in the master breaching community that's still being practiced today. Larry went on to serve in Special Missions Unit. And in April of 2005, 2004, Larry was in Fallujah, Iraq. He and a couple other operators were supporting a Marine company that had been overrun by hundreds of insurgents. And that day, Larry won a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. This is one photo. The photo that's below his Silver Star award has him launching some sort of contraption off of his shoulder that I still don't know what that is, with blood dripping off of his shirt and his pants because he was fragged 3 or 4 times. And when he was finished with that work on that rooftop, he went into close quarters combat and closed with and killed multiple insurgents. Larry taught me disciplined obedience. Larry taught me to train your trust and trust your training. Larry taught me the hard routine. And Larry taught me to show up and play up and finish every day. There's a lot of officers in here. LTs, find yourself a great NCO. NCOs, up your game. Make sure these lieutenants can train, fight, and win. Greatest thing that could have ever happened to me is Larry Boyven. November 15th, 2012, I get a phone call. It's Angela. Larry's dead. Larry and another friend of mine, Sergeant Major Willie Lubers, who I served in 3rd Special Forces Group with. Larry and Angela and Larry's wife, Tiffany, and Larry's wife, Angela, 4 of them, were on a hunt for heroes in Texas, going out hunting some animals down. And in that process, we're on a parade float, going through a Texas town. Nobody told the train locomotive company that there was a parade. And when the parade float in front of them stopped at a red light, their trailer was jackknifed on the railroad tracks. The personal accounts of that day said they saw 2 men remain on that parade float, throwing people off the float left and right. The last 2 people they threw off were their wives, Angela and Tiffany, before a locomotive took both their lives at 60 miles an hour. I've buried several friends in Arlington. One of the hardest I ever had to bury was Larry. But the warrior ethos in forging the soul that he taught me makes me want to do this much more every day. Here's the important thing about relationships in the military. Here's how you have to persevere in your warrior soul. You will lose friends in combat. I have lost friends in combat. Some of these men and women that have been to combat have lost friends in combat. And you've got to continue to build those relationships. 3 of them are in here today. I didn't even know Brandon was going to come. Jared Vineyard, Chaplain Vineyard, who's here, who's the Army's senior ethicist. Man, I got to meet him 6 years ago. We mind melded on how to do transformational leadership and character development, and I got a new friend. Jeff Teagues, had the privilege to be his chaplain, known him for 15 years. And when he started doing counter human trafficking and sex trafficking several years ago, he said, Anthony, I want you to be on my board. He said, I want to give you this. He gave me this sword. It's a Davidic sword. It's what the 30 mighty men carried, and on the handle it's Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens the next. To persevere in the warrior soul, you guys are going to have to continually build new relationships, because every PCS, every combat deployment, everything you do in the military, you're going to lose friends, and you got to find new ones. There's 3 of us chaplains sitting here today. We were all cadets in the same Bible study 30 years ago. 3 of us are chaplains. Isn't that crazy? Relationships matter. Second one is this. Relics. Relics. When I left the Ranger Training Brigade, I was really hoping for a new Jumpmaster knife. You know what I'm saying? I got a shepherd's crook. The chaplains and the religious affairs specialists gave this to me. It's a relic because it's not something that I wanted. It was something that was given to me by those that I served. And they said, Anthony, they said to us, you've been a shepherd. So they got a little Ranger tab up top there, and my name. But more importantly, they said, there's one thing that you've taught us to be as chaplains. As chaplains, you've taught us to wear 4 hats, and the way you've taught us is by the way you've taken care of us and our families and our soldiers. First of all, to be a ranger, to do everything that your soldiers do, to maintain or exceed the standard with a Bible verse. The next one, to be a priest, to baptize, bury, and marry, to bring that sacred presence of God in the deepest days of suffering and loss. The third, to be a prophet. I've had to speak truth to power to some senior officers in my career who always outranked me. I'm laughing today when Jeff's talking about how many times he's been fired. Do you know how many times I've been threatened to be fired as a chaplain? Better man for it. I've never compromised my principles or my character on who I am. And the fourth one is to be a pastor, to be a studier of my scriptures and my truth, and to preach and to teach that in a way that matters to people. This shepherd's crook's significant because what they didn't know is that my last name, Randall, comes from 15th century Saxony, England. The original connotation of that name is Renwolf. Renwolf means runner of wolves, or ring or shield. Our family was a tribe of shepherds, but we were kind of a unique tribe of shepherds. We didn't do the whole green pastures and cool streams and waters. We were direct action shepherds. We hunted down and killed wolf packs before they ever got to the sheep. My 8th great-grandfather was one of the Massachusetts militiamen that fired one of the first shots against British regulars to start the American Revolution. My 5th great-grandfather fought for the abolition of slavery as a Massachusetts militiaman and was captured in the Civil War and held as a POW by the Confederacy. Generations have served since. I loved every day that I served 20 plus years in the military. And now in the next few years, my daughter will commission as an officer next year, and my son will commission as an Air Force officer in the next few years. Relics are incredibly important because they remind you what I said at the beginning. They remind you who you are as a person of character. They remind you how you think, and they remind you how you lead. What's your relic? What's the story that you can tell and that you can be held accountable to? The last one is this, as we wrap up. Creeds, codes, and oaths. We started out today with the Marines, the few, the proud. Be all you can be, which I'm glad we got that motto back. It's the one that I signed up with in 1992. There's some other ones that are out there. I need your help for this, right? There's no instructions. I don't even give instructions, do I? Watch this. I am the infantry. I am the infantry. I am the infantry. You're going to want to do it harder than that because watch this. If you ain't Cav, you all just got bought and owned right there. If you ain't Cav, I am the infantry. If you ain't Cav, I am the infantry. If you ain't Cav, who just got a little bit of cohesion with the person sitting next to you, right? And what infantryman wants to fight an armored person right now? We got room right down here. Ladies and gentlemen, forging the warrior soul requires you to do some extensive spiritual, philosophical, and existential preparation. Practicing the warrior soul is your moral imperative to train and fight and win in the operational, institutional, and personal domain. Protecting the warrior soul is about implementing high-performance leadership through mission command and exercising disciplined obedience, training your trust, trusting your training, doing the hard routine, and showing up and playing up and finishing every day. And persevering in the warrior soul means to always build relationships and to honor the ones that you lose and to celebrate the ones that you're in, to find a relic that tells your story and to live by your code and your creed. This is the code and the creed that I've lived by for almost 30 years. It's the Ranger Creed. I want to thank the 75th Ranger Regiment and MCoE for sponsoring today and the ability for me to share a little bit of my story about how this creed has shaped me and continues to shape me. God bless you guys, and I think we've got a few minutes for questions. We don't have a few minutes for questions. Yep. So for the panel, I'm going to pass it over to Steve. For the panel, we're going to are we taking a break or going right to the panel? Going right to the panel. So the panel comes up. Here's how we're going to do the Q&A today, all right? You guys have been in seminars and stuff before where we say, what's your question? And then somebody stands up and makes a 2-minute statement, gives them your ORB, tells everybody how important they are, and then there's not a question for the person, right? Do you think that Colonel Grossman has context to what's going on here today? You think Dr. Kilner and Chaplain Vineyard and Jeff and I have some context? We got a ton of context. So this is how we do a great Q&A. Stand up. My name is Lieutenant Jones. My question is, and a question starts with typically what? One of the W's and an H. So who, what, where, when, or how, and then one of us will answer the question. And we're going to keep it pithy. Everybody on the panel is going to keep our answers to 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and Steve over here is going to cut us off if we go too long. So we want to answer as many questions as possible. So simply stand up. Lieutenant Bill Jones, my question is, ask the question, right? And then we will answer it. Sound good to everyone? Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
And please remember when you're answering, go ahead, they can clap for you. When you're asking a question, please wait for the microphone, as this is recorded on YouTube, so those who are watching will be able to hear your question. Thank you, Dr. Randall. At this time, we will transition for our panel discussion and time of question and answers. Our panel will include Dr. Kilner, Chaplain Vineyard, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Teagues, and Dr. Randall. Okay.
Someone goes teach the skills of
Lieutenant Colonel Teague will join us in a minute, so we can go ahead and start with the question and answer. So if you have a question and answer, raise your hand and the microphone will come to you.
Hey, I got a question for you real quick. As you're thinking of questions, I don't know most of you. I was with the cadre. So Jared Vineyard, good to meet you. I used to teach here a couple years ago, just left this summer in Leavenworth now. One of the things I challenged the cadre was this. We're talking about the soul of the warrior, and we've sort of asked it, but I would just ask you, how are you training your soul? Just period. And again, how are you doing that? You know, and just, there's a verse, and I always go to it, 1 Timothy 4, train yourself for godliness, but that word train in Greek, gymnasia, what's it sound like? Gym, it's where we get the word gym from. And so the question is, how are you training your soul? Because the discussion's irrelevant if you're not doing that. And so it assumes you're doing that. So I just challenge you, you know, there's a lot of, I don't know if there's a right answer to it, but there is some wrong answers. You know, and the first wrong answer is you're not doing anything. So I just encourage you, think about that, and you should be thinking about how am I doing that, and morally is a part of that. And morally is absolutely a part of that. Character is absolutely a part of that.
So we'll give you 60 seconds. Take out a piece of paper. Everybody write down one question. That's what I need to do. Everyone, you don't have to ask if you don't want to. I want you to go through the critical thinking process of writing down one question. All right? So take out a piece of pen and paper, write one question, and then I'm sure we'll have some good questions that'll populate. We'll give you a minute to do that.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Lieutenant Wisenhunt I. Bullock, and pardon me if the question is a little bit wordy. So a lot of times this morning it seemed that there was some distinction between good and evil, which provided justification for killing. I don't think recently we've really been in a situation where that distinction was not very black and white, at least in my opinion. So do you have any advice for walking our soldiers through this if we're ever sent out on a mission where that distinction is a little bit more gray? And I can give an example if you'd like.
So it sounds like the question is where it's not really clear that we're the just side, it's a little gray, and how do you, because all of our assumptions are that we're the good guys. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Maybe if we're not the good guys, or there's some question about that in the country.
Right. The way I approach this is, you represent America. That's why the flag's on our shoulder. Our political leaders are the head, the American people, the rest of the body. The military is the fist of the body politic. And the American people support that fist with training, with insurance, with your life and everything you do. And you've always said, hey, I'm around here. If you ever need me to punch someone, we'll punch. And the way I take it is, all of us who have raised our hand and taken the oath, we're not abdicating our moral responsibility, but we are saying we trust our government unless we're sure that it's wrong. And I think the typical civilian should be much more skeptical and say war almost never goes the way we want. It's always incredibly expensive. There's things we can't get back. So the American people should be more skeptical, and they should do that role. Our role is to trust, to listen, and to punch unless it's absolutely clear. And so most wars, at the time, there was great questions, because they're not just binary just or unjust, right? It's always just like our characters somewhere on that spectrum. But part of taking the oath is saying we will give the benefit of the doubt to the people we serve, to the Constitution we serve, and go with that. So that's my approach.
One of the things I shared with our group earlier, Army Doctrine 1966, and I wrote it down, said this: better men make better soldiers. That was literally a quote from Army Doctrine. And so we'll expand it to people now, but better people make better soldiers. And so what I encourage you to do, and what we chatted with earlier with the group, is we've got to get into these habits when it's easy, when it's clear. If I make the right decision when it's easy and when it's clear, I'm more likely, and I do that regularly, I'm more likely to make the right decision when it's unclear. And so we've got to build that moral muscle memory. We've got to build those habits. And again, if I'm building those habits in garrison, then guess what? Those habits will continue in combat. If I can be moral in the barracks, I'll be moral in Baghdad. If I can be moral in downtown Columbus, I'll be moral in Kabul. But the flip side is also true. If I can't be moral in the barracks or in Columbus, there's no way it's going to happen magically downrange. So I think the habits, the muscle memory starts now. And as young leaders, you're the ones to enforce that. You are the moral authority in that platoon, a platoon leader. You are the ones that are given that authority. So that would be what I say.
Very pragmatically, to answer your question, we did this when I was the ethics instructor here. Back in the day, MCCC and IBOLC and ABOLC would do a combined arms operation together towards the end of the course. I don't know if you guys still do that or not. What we did, and you can do this in your unit, go get with your unit chaplain, go get with your unit psych, go get with your JAG, whatever it is. And what we did is we implemented moral and ethical dilemmas and moral ethical scenarios in the lanes. So as they're out on the FTX, they're running into moral and ethical dilemmas. I did this in 3rd Special Forces Group too with our ODAs, and put them through this really cool challenge that took them all day, and they would come up on a moral ethical dilemma, and they'd have to work through an ethical decision-making process on what the right thing would be to do and debate that as a team and make a decision. So you can implement that kind of training, go into one of your chaplains or your JAG and implement that. Very, very briefly, come up on the road, there's a dude digging a ditch, and there's a dude with an AK-47. Well, some of us might think, oh, they're digging an IED. Well, or maybe that dude's digging his grave, and that guy's about to summarily execute him and put him in it. I don't know. But how are you going to address that situation? So there's opportunities to operationalize character development. We've done it here. We can do it in the institution. It takes work. No, geez. Do your job. Do the extra. Do this much more. And implement it into your operational training.
Can I just piggyback, because that's awesome. You can put it in ChatGPT and give it a scenario, and it will spit something out immediately. And so we've already done. I've already done that. I was asked to do, give me 15 moral dilemmas. So I gave, GPT, and of course you can't do it on the government, but Camo GPT. But you can do this. Here's all the criteria. Give me the scenario. Nuance it. Boom. You got it in seconds. And so you can create those moral dilemmas pretty quickly these days. And again, it's not graded. It's not one of those things where, but you can do that for the good of your formation and the good of the Army.
Had a whole chapter on killing on atrocity. First, understand that nobody in human history had done a better job than we do at trying to avoid collateral damage. focused energy. The second, even in court, we look at intent. Was it malice and forethought? Was it an act, is it a murder? It's just an accident. And intent is really an important part of the process. So number one, you're playing with the best team there's ever been on trying to do it right and trying to get it right. Number two, your intent is really a critical part of the equation. And you go out there with the intent to do good, there's a lot greater chance that good will be done.
Once you ask your question, you can sit back down. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thanks again for being here. Lieutenant Smith, ABOIC graduate now, I guess. My question is, is this good? Louder? Okay. My question is that the talks today have been very based on fundamental Christian assumptions. For those of us that have soldiers that may not have the same assumptions or take those beliefs as truths, like we have an individual soul that makes us a part of something better, that we have disciplined obedience, that we must actually listen to a greater or higher purpose. How do we define our morality for those that don't have the same assumptions as us, especially as officers, so we're not proselytizing to them, knowing that's against doctrine?
Yeah, I'll hit it. I'll give it to Anthony. So I would say, just like anything in the Army, start with doctrine, right? And so most of us don't even know doctrine because we don't read it. And so I would start with ADP 622 and go to the basics. So what is the fundamentals of character that the Army says is important? When you preach that, you're not preaching a specific faith. You're saying, humility, empathy are important. Thus saith the Army, right? And so at a minimum, that's where I would start. So I'll give you one example of that just to give some categories that the Army has. When I was here, we sort of built this model for trust. How do you build trust? Everybody talks about trust. How do you build it? We looked at doctrinal principles and we came up with an equation. Now, there's no equation for trust, but we came up with an equation. And so here was the equation. Character times competence times commitment, bracket, use the distributive principle, times consistency. So consistent character, consistent competence, consistent commitment equals trust. All right, if I have those categories, I can trust you, or I can potentially trust you. If I don't, I can't. And so, for instance, if I'm a zero character kind of guy, it zeroes out the formula. I will not trust you. If I'm a zero competence kind of guy, it zeroes out the formula. I will not trust you. So it's just an example to say, here's ways to look at doctrine and to use doctrine to build out, hey, we're going to build some trust. We're going to do it doctrinally speaking the Army way. And again, it sort of answers the mail across the board.
I think I mentioned this in my talk. I'd encourage you to read the book, The Code of the Warrior. There is not a warrior class in history that does not tie back their warrior ethos in understanding the soul of a warrior. There's not a warrior class in history that does not tie it back to their cultural or their religious practices. So you can say there's no soul. Well, there still is, right? So, and again, I've worked with all sorts of different religions all over the world, so has Jared, as chaplains. Every warrior class that I've studied has some sort of cultural and religious system that helps understand how the soul and the spirit functions in evil. And so I'd encourage you to pursue that. That's what Chaplain Vineyard said at the beginning. If you're not considering how to forge a warrior soul, then you should get to work. So there are philosophies out there. There's Stoicism, that's pretty popular in our Western civs, right? But I would just venture to say that from my studies and my understanding, every warrior class addresses the spiritual component. And you can do that through a philosophy as well, right? The last piece that I would challenge there that I've experienced in combat is I found that in combat everybody believes in God. They either believe in God or they believe they are one. And I've never found one in combat who would want someone to worship them in some of the deepest and darkest moments that they've been in combat, when they've morally failed, when they have been culpable of evil. And so, again, I would encourage you to read your books, read Code of the Warrior, read some other books, read some Musashi, read Book of Five Rings, read those different perspectives. Every warrior class addresses the soul, and so I just challenge you to pursue that.
Great answers, and I really enjoy what you said there with doctrine. Again, I've preached more to you guys today than I've ever preached to the men that I led, because I'm not in relationship with you. I mean, I share my qualities because I'm in relationship with them. And I didn't know where you were going. I like that, because there certainly are atheists in combat. Like that idea, there are no atheists in a foxhole. Oh yeah, there's plenty. But you are 100% correct. There's that, again, these people that are in these super achievers, they survive the impossible, and it reinforces this fact that they are God-like. But what is never God-like is relationships with your spouse and relationships with your children. And I don't know any of them that have really flourished in that space. And then specific to your question too, I would talk to that individual and find out what are his motivations, and I would lean on those. You don't have to have the same motivations as I. There's doctrine, there's the Constitution that we all take an oath to. Again, we don't take an oath to a president. We take an oath to the Constitution. We say we're going to follow the orders of the President of the United States and the officers appointed over me. So I would have that conversation with that individual, what is driving him, and hold him to that personal standard.
For soldiers that are atheists or have religions that are outside kind of the standard orthodoxy in the West, I would say that the military profession is an inherently moral enterprise, dealing with moral issues, independent of any belief in God. And so, the only thing that justifies taking a human life is protecting another life. We kill people who may be morally blameless because they've been misinformed about the cause of the war, but they're still threats to innocent lives. And so to someone who, I would think if they join the military, they're doing it to protect the American people, to protect our way of life and the things we love. And so I'm not sure, I think it's beneficial to be able to take it to a spiritual level, but a pure moral level, what the military does is kill dangerous people to protect many more innocent people, and that's inherently a moral issue that I think any human being can understand.
Gentlemen, Lieutenant Teach Out, able graduate. Question is, how do we effectively foster a training environment for formations to be spiritually prepared for warfare when our formations are having less and less seasoned war fighters present among the formation when you look at the troop level and below? Thank you.
Did you repeat the whole thing? It was, to me, it was sort of.
Yes, sir. How do we effectively train our formations to be spiritually prepared for warfare when our formations are having less and less seasoned war fighters among the troop level and below? Thank you.
I think the biggest area of payoff we could have is our after-action reviews. So we do great training, but we don't learn from experience. We learn if we reflect on our experience and what we've done. And so our Army's great because of the after-action reviews. We always look at doctrine, our tactics. We always look at leadership. I think we can bring in questions about, hey, you in this operation you killed those people. How do you feel about it, right? Why do you think it's the right thing? And so I think and we're already doing AARs anyway. So if we can put the lens of kind of the spiritual component, the lens of thinking about our souls, and just add it to the lens we have about tactics and logistics and everything else to our AARs, that could be a low resource, high payoff way to integrate it. And I'll say one more thing. Like, one thing I have some reservations about today is we're doing the typical Army thing. let's step away from training and go talk about ethics and character as if it's separated. And as long as we're doing that, we're solving some problems and creating others. And so our challenge, your challenge, is to integrate the soul conversations about that, to integrate character development into the training you already done. Because we're going to fight as we train, right? And so we want to integrate those components into our training and our in scenarios if you can, but especially in AARs.
You know, we know the majority of the learning happens afterwards in the AAR. How much more so do we want to learn the lessons when it's life and death? Use that AAR, use that process, but here's the key. As everybody talks about what happened, if the sympathetic nervous system starts kicking in, if you see the stress or you hear it in their voice, stop. Take a big swig of water, regain control. The sympathetic nervous, the relationship between the memory and the physiological arousal is the problem. We want to sever the memory from the arousal. And a powerful tool that takes you from sympathetic to parasympathetic process is a big swig of water. I teach a national international conference in Baltimore, CISM, and we all do the debrief, and we do the AR. But I have to get one step further and make it the first step in the healing process. Begin the process of separating the memory from the emotions. Remember, there's a very good chance that somebody's going to remember something that did not happen. And you're the only one who can say, no man, that's not what happened. And people have got memory gaps, you're the only one who can fill in that gap. So this goes from an issue to all really kind of a healing process through that AAR. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would add also intentionality and purpose, right? Like when you go to the marksmanship range, you're working on marksmanship. You're not working on medical training, unless that's what you're intending to do. And I think building that character, it's very intentional training styles. And you guys, there's never been a time where we've had more access to resources, like you said, with ChatGPT or whatever, you know, but taking people out of their comfort zone and really testing them with that intentionality. Just like you have a block of instruction, we're doing PT, we do PT. Like I talked about with my discussion, there are times where you will have an exercise where they will fail. It's designed for them to fail. There's no way they can finish it. And you observe now how they react, how they pick themselves up, how they conduct those AARs. You know, so that's the fun. It's what I miss out of being in charge. And it's what I miss about being the father of a little kid. That's how you were a dad, too. You find ways to develop character and competence and confidence in your children, and sometimes that's forcing them to fail, but it's always an intentionality and a focus of what you're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Give another book for you. Whether you're a martial artist, you like it. If not, it's called Living the Martial Way. It was written by an Air Force lieutenant colonel in the 1980s by a guy named Forrest Morgan. He is a phenomenal martial artist. He's in his late 60s, 70s now. In that book, he said, do not go to any dojo or martial arts school that emphasizes some spirituality or religion over the practice of the martial art. The martial arts is not a spiritual thing. The martial arts is the martial arts, right? Kick, punch, strike, takedown, choke, right? That's the martial arts. Is there a spiritual component behind living the martial way? Sure, Eastern philosophies, whether it's Taoism or Zen or Buddhism or Confucianism or Shinto or whatever it is, there are different belief systems and soul systems that are behind some of the different martial arts. But he said, don't go to a martial arts school that makes it weird, right? Like he took his students to a martial arts weekend and it was like a giant evangelical Christian retreat where like they want everybody to get saved, right? He's like, bad idea. Okay, so I would say the same thing for your formations, right? Spirituality is part of the Comprehensive Solar Fitness Program. Spirituality is in our doctrine, right? As a chaplain, I'm not your lucky rabbit's foot, right? Chaplain, sit in the lead Humvee. Hey bro, they can blow me up just as much as you, right? Well, I know, but I'm not a lucky rabbit's foot. And so I'll say this directly to the religious sport teams out here. If you're the stinking, side joke hustle on a Friday afternoon because a company commander or a battalion commander had a couple extra hours and they toss it to you, you're not doing your job. So, Lieutenant, go to your chaplains and make sure that your chaplains are submitting into their quarterly training briefs, their QTBs, and their annual training guidance, religious support training for your formation. That's how you get funding, chaplains, is by doing staff work. The best chaplains that I know are really great staff officers, and the better you can staff stuff, the more time you can spend as a chaplain, regardless of what your religious faith group is, to go out and be with soldiers and take care of them, because it's staffed and it's planned and it's in a calendar. So spiritual development can mean any religious or faith thing. And what we're saying up here today, we're not saying that you have to have some sort of, we're not placing spirituality over being a warfighter. I've trained with atheists and fought alongside them too and have great relationships with them. What we're saying is that the soul, the warrior soul, is real. And you need to investigate how you go deep in that warrior soul and how you shape it for yourself with your philosophy or your religious beliefs or whatever the case may be. We're not putting one over the top of the other, but it is a foundational principle. That's different than our society. Yeah, we live in a secular society. I would tell you civilians can go do whatever the heck they want to do. But if you're going to be in the military and you're going to kill another human being, killing someone is a spiritual act. So you've got to figure it out at that level.
Next question.
All right.
Hey, no dirty, nasty civilians.
That's right. That's right. Lieutenant Colonel retired Mike Baca. Got more of a, I guess, advice if you could provide to some of these young officers. You know, through our experience, some of on the stage, I know I dealt with it too. Killing's unnatural, and you know, you have soldiers. Even I had asked the question on comm, what do we do? And you get the order, kill them. You know, they need permission almost. But also, when they pull the trigger, in some of these instances, I can think of many instances where a soldier pulled the trigger. It was a good shoot. Took out driver of a vehicle that was going into a cordon, and then we put the JAG ends up putting that soldier. You put the whole unit through an investigative process. You know, so how do you carry this? How do you carry leaders through dealing with JAG, the other component of the ethics in war, and making sure the soldiers will shoot the same in a similar circumstance after going through that? And anyone take that?
Yeah. First thing I would say, I think killing is very natural. I think we have to stop saying it's unnatural. And you talked about this again. When we come from a culture of hunting, we used to kill our own animals. I mean, we have huge swaths in our population that say killing animals is unnatural. Yet they eat them frozen. You know, mankind since the start of man. You know, again, I appreciate the discussion, and I do want to talk about that. I love the way Anthony mentioned that. Yeah, we're sharing our own personal walk, but you figure it out your own way. Again, in my personal walk, the first two guys that were born, one of them killed the other one. Like, killing is a natural part of the world, and the more we isolate ourselves and we have that comfort, you know, we're pretending something that isn't there. So I think one of those things you guys have to recognize and understand, killing is natural. War is natural. War, I don't know if they teach this to you guys, but I remember it being taught when I was in your seats. War is the natural order of the world. It's intermittent times of peace that are not the norm. Warfare and fighting is the norm. We've kind of, with the modern world, and especially with the Western comfort, we've turned it upside down. Now, to talk specifically about your thing too, Mike, is the things like I talked about. Look, if you're doing the right thing, if you've already established who you are as a person and a spiritual person, and you made the right call, you have to let the chips fall where they may. And that's what I encourage you guys. Don't ever be afraid of the way JAG is going to look at it, or the way your boss is going to look at it. You are paid for your judgment. You're making that call on the ground, and you have to be able to trust your instincts and somehow develop that level of confidence in your guys.
Doctrinally, what Mike's talking about is the principle of double effect. I'm not going to bore all of you with the concept of double effect. Go back and read the principle of double effect in Use in Velo and what double effect is. And I'm not going to tell you the answer. I don't think any of us should. Go figure it out. But that's what he's asking.
Yeah, and we've said it, but just to kind of say it again, right? Every murder is a killing, but every killing isn't a murder. And we train to kill, and we should be talking about that, but we are never authorized to murder. And the soldiers should know that. And the actions and decisions that we make ought to be right. The Army used to define right in ADRP 1 is ethical, effective, and efficient. And you have to define what are those. But I would go back even to I wrote the acronym down, GAIT, G-A-I-T. It's almost Aristotle's way of, is it the right goal, the right action, the right intent, the right time? Now, again, that's something I have to think about ahead of the right time. But my men and women who serve under me ought to know this is what we're training to do. I shared with the group in there one of my last firefights that I was a part of in Afghanistan, and I was a chaplain, so I was just there, right? It was going on around me. One of these big infantrymen came up to me after the firefight was over, and he said, "Chaplain, can we talk?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So he said, "No, can we go behind the building and talk?" And we did, and his eyes got misty. And he said, "Can you tell me why I'm not a murderer?" Now, I had to ask him some probing questions because he might be. I don't know. Right? So I asked him, and he wasn't. He had just killed somebody in close proximity, and it was weighing on him. And so, again, we have this, and we did. We had about 3 hours to tease out the philosophical, theological depth of what does that mean. But you could summarize it with, did you kill? Yes. Did you murder? No. Why? For all of these reasons. And what I would say is this, but there's emotions tied to it. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. If there's emotions that are tied to it. I would be shocked. I would be afraid if there wasn't emotions tied to it. And just because we do the right thing in the right way, with the right goal, doesn't mean we're not going to have emotions with that. We should. There is loss that is going on. First people that, very, very often when you go hunting, sometimes the first animal you kill, you'll take the heart, right? And there's sometimes this almost ceremony where there's a loss. And there's this grieving process almost, and that's okay. So just because we make the right decision doesn't mean there's not going to be emotions attached to it. In fact, I would expect there should be. It's what we do with those emotions.
So, Mike, what I heard you say is a situation where your soldiers, based on the information they had at hand, thought it was a legitimate threat of a V-bid, but ended up killing a family. We did that all the time in Iraq. We killed hundreds or not thousands of civilians driving down the street, and almost every time it was because it was a drunk driver or someone visually impaired who shouldn't have been driving, so they went right through our cones and they didn't see any of our warning signs. And that's tragic, right? Because in that case, it's not double effect. They thought it was a good target. It was a case of mistaken information. And that's devastating because your soldiers go up there and it's just a family with a bunch of machine gun rounds to them. And you've killed, civilians. And that's the fog of war. And so there's no good answer except to say, with the information you had at hand, with the guidance I gave you as your leader, you did the right thing. You were trying to protect your fellow soldiers and the other people we protect here. And tomorrow, if you have the exact same situation, your country needs you to fire again. And that's hard, because I know one of the biggest fears after we do a civilian killing is no one wants to shoot at vehicles coming through the checkpoints. And that's how we get blown up and things go really badly. And so there's no good answer. I would say just you're sympathetic. And then when the investigation comes along, that is just really grating, because the soldiers already feel terrible, and very often the investigators come in and they're trying to see if you're a murderer. You'll face this in your unit. We got, after a while, probably 2005 on, every time we killed someone, there's an investigation. Units responded in two ways. In some units, they just lied. They just all agreed on their story and told their story, or they used drop weapons. And I can tell you, if it was ever well-intentioned because they're trying to protect their soldiers who did the right thing, the second and third order consequences of unethical behavior is terrible. So if you ever countenance that as a leader, you're condemning your soldiers to moral injury later on. Because if you let it go once, they're going to be doing a whole lot when you're not watching. So you don't want to do that. All you can do is tell your soldiers, everyone tell the truth, and try to talk to the JAG people and say, my God, people here are making life and death decisions with incomplete information, with almost no time. Have a heart.
We have time for one more question in the back.
Gentlemen, Lieutenant Otley, I will graduate. My question is, Dr. Kilner, you started us off wonderfully this morning talking about a character framework and the virtues that we need to uphold within ourselves. But you mentioned spirituality as something that may need to be added, spiritual virtues. To the panel, what are some spiritual virtues that you have upholded, that you've added to your own character framework? And why have you added them, and how have you seen them impact your soldiers in a positive manner?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just start. I'm a Christian chaplain, and so Anthony's already mentioned it, but the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. For me, those have been foundational. And do I have to be a Christian to understand faith, hope, and love? No, I don't. But I understand them because I'm a Christian. And so that has caused me to look at things differently. And even from the aspect of love, I'll give you an example. So sort of the medieval way of saying is charity. So charity, love, sort of the same thing that they were talking about. One of the early fathers, Augustine, would write about sometimes love dictates killing. Love of neighbor who's killing other neighbors makes me go in and have to kill. And so sometimes killing is an act of love. And I know that sounds counterintuitive today, but again, just those three theological virtues are so deep. And again, Anthony already mentioned them, but when you put those together with what was understood as the four cardinal virtues, which were not Christian, I mean, they were Greek, they were Roman, I mean, they're sort of just universal, and depending on how you word it, it's prudence, justice, courage, and temperance, or you could say them slightly differently. But when you take those four cardinal virtues that could be done anywhere by anybody, according to some, and you add the theological virtues to them, it's just powerful, right? And again, 7 in the Christian tradition, 7 days of a week, sort of the number of completeness. It's like this complete set of virtues that you have. But those are the three theological virtues that I've gone back to.
I'm open to suggestions from others because we're developing this domain. I think silence. There's not enough silence in the world. I'm at the point in life where I can go off and do silent retreats for 3 or 4 days, and it's amazing what we learn about ourselves and the world by just dwelling in silence and kind of meditation and prayer. I also wonder if a spiritual virtue is vocation, of thinking constantly or regularly about what is my purpose in life. Every one of us have different strengths and weaknesses that came genetically, that from our family, our experiences. Why? Like, what is my vocation? How do I bring my specific experiences, the good and the bad, right, to the world to make the world better? Which it gets down to purpose. So those are, two things, and that's what I have in mind in terms of spiritual virtues. Maybe mindfulness too.
Yeah, I don't separate mine out. I think, again, you guys know I have a Judeo-Christian background, part of it, but part of where I've settled with this spiritual identity, character, humility. I like what you said. I've never heard that before. To sacrifice your love, to sacrifice your life isn't necessarily the greatest gift, to live a life of sacrifice. And I think that's, many of us, probably around 2007, 2006, 2007, a lot of men concluded they weren't coming home. And that was okay, because they believed in what it was we were doing as we were protecting our brothers. So this idea of a real understanding of sacrifice, and that's again why I think, going back to the question you had, that individual who doesn't have that spiritual grounding He needs to find it somewhere. I don't care if it's in a rock, I don't care if it's in a tree, I don't care if he's a Viking, I don't care what, whatever it is, you have to be able to understand what that sacrificial style of life is, not just in the hardship, but I was prepared to die because I understood my identity as a protector.
I would just reinforce what I already shared. I think for me it would be courage, because Plato said that courage is the virtue of the warrior. I would say that it's justice and love. Those would be the three virtues. And within those, that spiritual element is, going to what Dr. Kilner said, what is your process for restoring your soul? A lot of different warrior traditions have rituals, washing or cleansing coming back from combat. I used to like to eat at Chili's and jump in the pool in Qatar before I'd come back out of theater. Right? But, we all, right, smoking a cigar with somebody, right? Some of you like to get out in nature, like Colonel Grossman does, and hunt. So it's reconnecting the creation with the Creator, doing things like that. So I would say it's justice, love, and courage, and then that practice, and it's in all different philosophies and all different faiths. How do you create space to take accountability and ownership, confess, a place of silence for contrition, to give and receive absolution and forgiveness, to be forgiven and also forgive yourself?
Well, when we talk about virtues, it interacts with the physiology of your body. It's a critical part of the equation. Well, this is important. Bravery. You can act glad, never really be that. Act sad, never be sad. If you act brave, you are brave. Understand? You might have crapped yourself and pissed yourself. You might be shaken like a leaf. But if you are doing what you need to do, you are a very brave person. And should prepare to both look at this negative side and yet understand the courage of those who move towards the sound of the gun in spite of all the things their body's trying to tell them.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your valuable insights. You have set the conditions for these warfighters to mentally and spiritually prepare for the next conflict. Please join me in a round of applause for all our presenters. Tomorrow, the symposium will resume at 0900 at the Main Post Chapel. The focus of day 2 will be on our caregivers, unit ministry teams, behavioral health, H2F, and medical providers. You can find the agenda for day 2 and biographies for the presenters in the symposium guide. There's an optional social this evening at the Infantry Bar from 17:15 until 18:30. Thank you all for joining us today at the Preparing the Soul for War Symposium.